Welcome to another exciting episode on the Fanfic Club. Today, we're exploring a captivating tale called, What If Madame Pomfrey's scan after troll attack found 38 tracking spells and all of them led back to Dumbledore's office. Before we begin, if you enjoy our content, please support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It helps more than you know. And now, the story awaits. Chapter 1. The threads revealed the hospital wing at Hogwarts was eerily quiet following Halloween night's chaos. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across pristine white beds. In one of these beds lay Harry Potter, his black hair a stark contrast against the pale pillowcase. His glasses sat folded on the bedside table, making the world around him a soft blur. Only hours earlier, he had faced a mountain troll alongside Ron Weasley to save Hermione Granger. Though Professor McGonagall had sent them back to Gryffindor Tower with points awarded rather than taken, Madame Pomfrey had intercepted them in the corridor, insisting on examining Harry after noticing him favoring his right arm. "Just a precaution, Mr. Potter," she'd said firmly. "Troll encounters are not to be taken lightly." Now Harry found himself unable to sleep despite the late hour and the healing draught Madame Pomfrey had administered. His arm no longer hurt where the Trolls Club had grazed him, but his mind raced with the evening's events. He had friends now, actual friends who would face a 12-foot troll for each other. The thought made him smile into the darkness. The sound of hushed voices from Madame Pomfrey's office broke the silence. Harry couldn't make out the words, but something about the urgent tone made him tense. Straining to hear, he wished he had his glasses to see who had joined the matron at this late hour. The office door opened, spilling golden lamplight into the ward. Harry quickly closed his eyes, feigning sleep. Soft footsteps approached his bed, more than one person, he realized. "Are you certain, Poppy?" Professor McGonagall's whisper was tight with an emotion Harry couldn't identify. "Completely. I've run the diagnostic 3 times. Madame Pomfrey's voice trembled slightly. 38 distinct magical signatures, Minerva. 38. On an 11-year-old boy. Harry fought to keep his breathing even, though his heart had begun to race. Were they talking about him? And they all trace back to... McGonagall's voice dropped even lower. Yes. All of them. His office, specifically. Madame Pomfrey's voice had taken on a hard edge Harry had never heard before. "I've worked at Hogwarts for 27 years, and I have never seen anything like this. Not even during the war." Something cold settled in Harry's stomach. They were definitely talking about him. "What types of spells are we discussing?" McGonagall asked. Harry heard parchment rustling. "Tracking charms, primarily. Different varieties, location monitoring, proximity alerts, emotional state indicators." Madame Pomfrey paused. "But there are others that concern me far more. Behavioral modifiers. Subtle loyalty enhancers. Memory adjusters." Professor McGonagall gasped. "Albus wouldn't. The evidence is right here, Minerva. I've documented everything. These spells have his magical signature. And look at the timestamps, some date back to when the boy was an infant, but many were applied within hours of his arrival at Hogwarts." Harry couldn't maintain the pretense any longer. He shifted and opened his eyes, reaching for his glasses. 2 blurry figures turned toward him. "Mr. Potter," Professor McGonagall said, her voice immediately shifting to a gentler tone. "I apologize if we woke you." Harry slid his glasses on, bringing the 2 witches into focus. Madame Pomfrey looked pale, clutching a roll of parchment covered in glowing marks. Professor McGonagall's lips were pressed into a thin line, her eyes unusually bright behind her square spectacles. "You're talking about me," Harry said. It wasn't a question. The 2 women exchanged a look. "Yes, Mr. Potter," Madame Pomfrey finally said. "I'm afraid we are." She moved to sit on the edge of his bed. "When I performed the standard diagnostic charms on you earlier this evening, I discovered something troubling." someone put spells on me? Harry asked, his voice smaller than he intended. 38 of them. Professor McGonagall's eyebrows rose. You heard that much, then? Harry nodded, a knot forming in his throat. Who did it? And why? Another weighted glance passed between the witches. It was McGonagall who finally spoke, her Scottish brogue more pronounced than usual. It appears the spells originate from Headmaster Dumbledore's office, Mr. Potter. Harry blinked, certain he'd misheard. Professor Dumbledore? But why would he? The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. The kind, grandfatherly wizard with twinkling eyes who had welcomed him to Hogwarts, who had seemed so genuinely pleased to see Harry thriving, had been secretly casting spells on him. That is what we intend to find out, McGonagall said firmly. Rest assured, Mr. Potter, this will be investigated thoroughly. Harry's mind whirled with implications. Does this have something to do with Voldemort? With my scar? Madame Pomfrey flinched at the name, but Professor McGonagall merely pursed her lips. I cannot say with certainty, but I doubt it. These appear to be monitoring spells, primarily. Her hesitation told Harry she wasn't sharing everything. The behavioral modifiers, he said, recalling what he'd overheard. What do those do? Madame Pomfrey sighed. They're subtle influences, Mr. Potter. Nothing that would completely override your free will, but enough to nudge you in certain directions. Make you more inclined to trust certain people, for instance. Or less likely to question authority figures. The cold feeling in Harry's stomach spread throughout his body. Since arriving at Hogwarts, he had felt an immediate, inexplicable trust in Dumbledore, a man he had never met before. Had that been manufactured? Can you remove them? He asked, hating how his voice cracked. Some of them, yes, Madame Pomfrey said. Others are more deeply integrated with your magic. Those will require careful work to untangle without causing harm. Harry sat up straighter. Do it. Please. I want them gone. Potter, McGonagall said softly, we should proceed with caution. We don't yet understand why these spells were placed. I don't care why, Harry interrupted, surprising himself with his vehemence. They're on me without my permission. I want them off. Madame Pomfrey nodded. I understand your feelings, Mr. Potter, but Professor McGonagall is right. Removing 38 interwoven spells from a growing wizard isn't like pulling off a plaster. It must be done methodically to prevent magical shock. Harry clenched his fists in the bedsheet. After 10 years with the Dursleys, he was intimately familiar with the feeling of being controlled, of having no say in his own life. Hogwarts was supposed to be different. How long? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. To safely remove all of them? Several weeks, at minimum, Madame Pomfrey said. But I can begin with the most concerning ones immediately. Harry nodded. And, will you tell Professor Dumbledore? The two witches exchanged another look. That presents a dilemma, McGonagall admitted. As headmaster, Albus should be informed of any medical procedures performed on a student. However, given the circumstances, he'll just put them back, won't he? Harry said quietly. Or worse ones. Neither woman contradicted him, which was answer enough. Mr. Potter, McGonagall said finally, I have served as deputy headmistress under Albus Dumbledore for many years. I have tremendous respect for him. But my primary duty is to the students of Hogwarts, to you. Her voice gained strength as she spoke. I will not allow any student under my care to be subjected to unauthorized magical influence, regardless of who cast the spells or their intended purpose. Madame Pomfrey nodded firmly. Nor will I. It violates every principle of medical ethics. For the first time since the conversation began, Harry felt a flicker of hope. These two formidable witches were on his side. What happens now? He asked. First, I suggest we move you from the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey said. If the headmaster learns you're here, he might become curious about my findings. You can come to my personal quarters tonight, McGonagall offered. Few know their location, and they're well warded. Tomorrow, we can determine a more permanent solution. Harry hesitated. Could my friends help? Ron and Hermione. They were with me during the troll incident. They might be in danger too. A wise consideration, McGonagall said approvingly. Madame Pomfrey, could you scan Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley as well? I'll bring them in for a follow-up examination, first thing tomorrow, the matron agreed. Now, Mr. Potter, if you're able to walk, we should relocate you immediately. Harry swung his legs over the side of the bed, feeling strangely vulnerable in his hospital pajamas. I'm ready. Professor McGonagall's personal quarters were nothing like Harry had imagined. Instead of the severe, orderly space he'd expected, he found himself in a warm, comfortable sitting room with tartan-patterned armchairs before a crackling fire. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a large desk sat in the corner, covered with student essays and correspondence. A tabby cat that looked remarkably like McGonagall's animagus form dozed in a basket near the hearth. That's Highland, McGonagall explained, following his gaze. A gift from my late husband. Many find it amusing that I keep a cat, given my own abilities. The casual mention of her personal life startled Harry. In the classroom, Professor McGonagall was the epitome of professional detachment. Here, in her private space, she seemed more human. You can take the guest room, she continued, gesturing to a door on the left. It's small, but serviceable. The bathroom is through there. Thank you, Professor, Harry said awkwardly. I'm sorry to impose. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. You have nothing to apologize for, Mr. Potter. You are the wronged party in this situation. She gestured for him to sit in one of the armchairs while she took the other. I owe you an explanation, she said once they were both settled. When Madame Pomfrey first discovered these spells, I was reluctant to believe the headmaster could be responsible. Albus Dumbledore has been a champion for the light for longer than you've been alive. He defeated Grindelwald, opposed you-know-who, and has advocated for Muggleborn rights for decades. Harry nodded. This matched what he'd heard about Dumbledore. But, McGonagall continued, her voice hardening, no one is above scrutiny. And no one, no matter how powerful or well-intentioned, has the right to place behavioral modification spells on a child without consent. Do you know why he did it? Harry asked, the question that had been burning inside him since he'd first overheard their conversation. McGonagall sighed, suddenly looking tired. I have theories, none of them satisfying. Albus has always been secretive about his long-term plans. He believes in the greater good, sometimes, I fear, at the expense of individual well-being. Because I survived when Voldemort tried to kill me? Because of whatever connection we have? Partially, perhaps. You occupy a unique position in our world, Mr. Potter, whether you wish to or not. But I suspect there's more to it. She gazed into the fire for a moment before continuing. Albus was adamant about your placement with your Muggle relatives, despite my objections. I watched that house for an entire day before you arrived. They seemed most unsuitable. Harry's heart skipped a beat. You were there. You knew what they were like. I observed them for one day only, McGonagall clarified. I saw enough to raise concerns, which I expressed to Albus. He insisted the blood protection from your mother's sacrifice outweighed any discomforts you might experience. Discomforts, Harry repeated hollowly. The cupboard under the stairs. The hunger. The hand-me-down clothes. The constant belittling and bullying. Reduced to discomforts. McGonagall seemed to read something in his expression. Was it worse than discomfort, Mr. Potter? Harry looked away, unwilling to discuss the Dursleys. It doesn't matter now. On the contrary, McGonagall said quietly. It matters a great deal. If Albus placed you in an abusive environment knowingly, then added compulsion spells to ensure your compliance. She didn't finish the thought. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and Highland's soft purring. "There's something else you should know," McGonagall finally said. "Your parents appointed godparents for you, standard practice during the war. Your godmother, Alice Longbottom, is unfortunately unable to care for you due to circumstances beyond her control. But your godfather, Sirius Black, I have a godfather." Harry interrupted, leaning forward. McGonagall's expression grew troubled. "Yes. However, he was imprisoned shortly after your parents' death. He was accused of betraying your parents to you-know-who and killing 13 people." Harry sank back, the brief surge of hope extinguished. "Oh. I mention this because it relates to our current situation. There were irregularities in Black's case. No trial, for one thing. Albus, as chief warlock, could have insisted on proper procedure but chose not to." McGonagall's lips thinned. "I never questioned it at the time. The evidence seemed overwhelming, and we were all in shock. But now, considering these tracking spells. You think Dumbledore might have had reasons for not wanting my godfather to get a fair trial?" Harry asked, trying to follow her logic. "I think we cannot discount any possibility," McGonagall said carefully. "If Black was innocent, and I'm not saying he was, it would have disrupted Albus's plans for your placement." Harry's head was spinning with implications. "So what do we do now?" "For tonight, you rest," McGonagall said firmly. "Tomorrow, Madame Pomfrey will examine your friends and begin removing the most insidious spells from you. I will make discreet inquiries about Sirius Black's case." "And Professor Dumbledore?" Harry asked. "For now, we proceed with caution. He must not suspect we know about the spells until we understand more and have secured your safety." McGonagall fixed him with a penetrating look. "Can you act normally around him, Mr. Potter? This is crucial." Harry thought of the Dursleys, how he'd learned to hide his true feelings, to present whatever face would lead to the least trouble. "Yes, Professor. I can." McGonagall nodded, though she looked troubled by his ready agreement. "Very well. I suggest we both get some sleep. Tomorrow will be challenging enough." As Harry settled into the small but comfortable guest room, his mind raced with everything he'd learned. The wizarding world, which had seemed like such a miraculous escape from the Dursleys, suddenly felt dangerous in new and complicated ways. Dumbledore, whom Harry had instinctively trusted and admired, was manipulating him for unknown purposes. Yet despite everything, Harry felt something unfamiliar taking root alongside the betrayal and confusion, a fierce determination. He'd survived the Dursleys. He'd survived Voldemort, twice now. He would survive whatever Dumbledore had planned for him too. And this time, he wouldn't be facing it alone. Morning came too quickly. Harry woke disoriented in the unfamiliar room, momentarily panicking before remembering where he was and why. Highland the cat had somehow gained access to the guest room and was curled at the foot of his bed, watching him with intelligent eyes. "Good morning," Harry said, feeling only slightly foolish for addressing the cat. Highland blinked slowly in response. A knock came at the door. "Mr. Potter? Are you awake?" McGonagall called. "Yes, Professor," Harry replied, reaching for his glasses. "Breakfast is ready whenever you are. I've taken the liberty of requesting some clothes from your dormitory. They're outside your door." "Thank you," Harry said, surprised by the thoughtfulness. After washing up and changing into his own clothes, Harry joined McGonagall at a small table in her sitting room. A modest breakfast of porridge, toast, and tea was laid out. "I hope you slept well," McGonagall said, pouring him tea. "Well enough," Harry replied. In truth, he'd tossed and turned for hours, his mind refusing to quiet. "I've sent messages to Ms. Granger and Mr. Weasley requesting they visit the hospital wing before breakfast," McGonagall informed him. "Madame Pomfrey will examine them and send them here afterward." Harry nodded, taking a bite of toast despite having little appetite. What excuse did you give? A simple follow-up after the troll incident. Standard procedure. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Harry gathered the courage to ask, Professor, what exactly do these spells on me do? You mentioned tracking, but what else? McGonagall set down her teacup with precision. According to Madame Pomfrey's analysis, there are several categories. The most numerous are indeed tracking and monitoring spells, some keyed to your location, others to your physical condition or emotional state. There are 5 different variants that alert the caster when you experience strong fear. Harry frowned. So Dumbledore always knows where I am and how I'm feeling. In essence, yes, McGonagall confirmed. Then there are what might be called influenced spells. Subtle compulsions that wouldn't override your free will entirely but would nudge your behavior in certain directions. Like what? Harry asked, feeling slightly ill. According to Poppy, there's one that encourages trust toward authority figures, particularly Dumbledore himself. Another dampens curiosity about certain topics, though we don't yet know which ones. There's a surprisingly complex one that seems designed to strengthen your attachment to Hogwarts itself. McGonagall paused. And one that increases risk-taking behavior in certain situations. Harry set down his spoon, appetite completely gone now. He's been making me do things. Controlling how I feel. Not precisely controlling, McGonagall corrected. These aren't imperious-level compulsions. Think of them more as weighted dice. You still roll them yourself, but they're more likely to come up with certain numbers. That doesn't make it better, Harry said flatly. No, McGonagall agreed. It doesn't. A soft chime sounded, interrupting their conversation. That would be your friends, McGonagall said, rising. Madame Pomfrey has sent them here. She opened the door to reveal Ron and Hermione, both looking confused and slightly nervous. Professor? Hermione began. Madame Pomfrey said we should come to your quarters, but she wouldn't explain why. Is something wrong? Yeah, Ron added. She did some weird scanning spell on us both and then got this really scary look on her face. Come in, both of you, McGonagall said, ushering them inside. There's much to discuss. Harry stood as his friends entered, relieved to see them but apprehensive about their reactions. Harry! Hermione exclaimed. What are you doing here? Madame Pomfrey wouldn't tell us where you were. It's a long story, Harry said. But it involves why Madame Pomfrey examined you this morning. As the 4 of them sat around McGonagall's sitting room, Harry and the professor took turns explaining the situation. Harry watched his friends' expressions shift from confusion to disbelief to outrage. Bloody hell, Ron breathed when they finished. Dumbledore's been what? Language, Mr. Weasley, McGonagall admonished, though without her usual sharpness. But that's illegal. Hermione burst out. I've read about magical consent laws. No one can place behavioral modification spells on another person without their explicit consent, or in the case of minors, the consent of their magical guardian. You are correct, Ms. Granger, McGonagall said. And therein lies another complication. As headmaster, Albus serves as temporary magical guardian to Muggle-born and Muggle-raised students while they're at Hogwarts. So he used a loophole, Hermione said, eyes narrowing. But that can't possibly extend to the spells placed on Harry before he came to Hogwarts. Indeed not, McGonagall agreed. Those would have been illegal under any circumstances. What about us? Ron asked, his freckles standing out against his pale face. Did Madame Pomfrey find anything on us? McGonagall's expression tightened. Yes, Mr. Weasley. You have 3 tracking spells and 1 mild loyalty enhancement directed toward the Headmaster. Ms. Granger, you have 4 tracking spells and what appears to be a subtle dampening charm on magical research related to certain restricted topics. Hermione gasped. He's been limiting what I can learn. What topics? Madame Pomfrey isn't certain yet, McGonagall admitted. Blood magic was mentioned, as well as certain branches of mind magic. But why? Ron asked, looking bewildered. Why would Dumbledore do this? He's supposed to be the greatest wizard since Merlin, the leader of the light. That, McGonagall said grimly, is what we need to determine. A knock at the door silenced them all. McGonagall rose swiftly, her wand appearing in her hand. Behind me, all of you, she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. The 3 students complied, moving to stand behind the professor as she approached the door cautiously. Who is it? She called. Severus, came the unmistakable drawl of the potions master. A word, Minerva. McGonagall's shoulders tensed. Now is not convenient, Severus. It concerns Potter, Snape replied. And certain discoveries Poppy made last night. The 3 students exchanged alarmed glances. How did Snape know? McGonagall seemed to deliberate for a moment before saying, if you give me your word this conversation will remain between us, you may enter. You have it, Snape replied immediately. McGonagall opened the door just enough for Snape to slip through, then closed and locked it behind him. The potions master froze momentarily when he saw the 3 students, his dark eyes narrowing. I see I am late to the conspiracy, he said silkily. There is no conspiracy, Severus, McGonagall replied crisply. Merely concerned educators looking after their students' well-being. Snape's gaze lingered on Harry, something unreadable flickering in his expression. Indeed. Then perhaps you can explain why Poppy Pomfrey summoned me at dawn to show me diagnostic results indicating that the headmaster has placed unauthorized spells on students, specifically, these 3. How did you know about Ron and Hermione? Harry blurted out. Madame Pomfrey only examined them this morning. I was there when she did, Potter, disillusioned in the corner, Snape said impatiently. After what she discovered on you last night, she wanted another qualified witness for the subsequent examinations. And what is your position on these discoveries, Severus? McGonagall asked carefully. Snape's lips thinned. I find myself disturbed by the breadth and nature of the magical influences. Particularly those on Potter. You're actually concerned about Harry? Ron said incredulously. You hate him. I dislike his arrogance and recklessness, Snape corrected coldly. That does not mean I approve of anyone, even the headmaster, placing behavioral modification spells on a child. Some of those spells might explain the very behaviors you dislike, McGonagall pointed out. Particularly the one encouraging risk-taking. Something shifted in Snape's expression, surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. He turned back to Harry, studying him with new intensity. Is this true? He demanded. Harry met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. I don't know. I didn't even know the spells were there until last night. Snape frowned, then seemed to come to a decision. I have information that may be relevant to your situation, Potter. Information about the headmaster's methods. Severus, McGonagall began warningly. They deserve to know what they're dealing with, Minerva, Snape interrupted. Especially if they intend to challenge him. We're not challenging anyone yet, McGonagall corrected. We're gathering information and ensuring student safety. A noble sentiment, Snape said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But naive. The moment Albus realizes his spells have been discovered, he will act. You know this. McGonagall didn't contradict him. Instead, she gestured for everyone to sit. What information do you have, Severus? Snape remained standing, his black robes making him look like a dark spectre in McGonagall's warm sitting room. I have been in Albus Dumbledore's service since before the Dark Lord's fall, he began. I have observed his methods, his manipulations, his chess player's approach to people's lives. Harry noticed that Snape avoided looking directly at him as he continued, the headmaster believes absolutely in his vision of the greater good. He will sacrifice individual happiness, safety, even lives, if he believes it serves that vision. But he's fought against dark wizards his whole life, Hermione objected. His record, Snape cut in, is carefully cultivated, Ms. Granger. I do not dispute that Albus opposes Dark Lords. But his methods are not always as light as his public persona suggests. What does this have to do with the spells on Harry? Ron asked. Snape's gaze finally moved to Harry, his expression inscrutable. Potter is central to Dumbledore's plans. He has been since before his birth, when a prophecy was made. A prophecy? Harry repeated, shocked. About me? About you and the Dark Lord, Snape confirmed, something like discomfort crossing his face. I cannot reveal its full contents, I don't know them myself. But it indicated you would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. Voldemort is dead, Harry said automatically. Is he? Snape countered softly. Albus does not believe so. And after your encounter with whatever was possessing Quirrell on Halloween night, can you be certain? Harry felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath him. How do you know about that? The headmaster informed the staff that the troll was a diversion, Snape said. That while everyone was searching the dungeons, someone attempted to breach the third-floor corridor. He didn't name Quirrell specifically, but the defense professor's absence was noted. Harry exchanged stunned looks with Ron and Hermione. They'd been so focused on the troll that they hadn't connected Quirrell's odd behavior to the forbidden corridor Dumbledore had warned everyone away from at the start of term. What's in the third-floor corridor? Hermione asked. Something the headmaster is protecting, Snape said vaguely. Something he believes the Dark Lord seeks. If you know who is after whatever's hidden there, and Quirrell's helping him, Ron said slowly, why hasn't Dumbledore sacked Quirrell? An excellent question, Mr. Weasley, Snape said, looking faintly surprised at Ron's insight. One might almost think the headmaster is allowing events to unfold for a purpose. With Harry at the center, McGonagall said grimly, catching on. These spells, the ones encouraging risk-taking and trust in Dumbledore, they're not random. They're designed to push Harry toward confronting whatever threat is in the castle. That's insane, Hermione protested. Harry's 11. He can't be expected to fight you-know-who. And yet, Snape said quietly, that appears to be precisely what Dumbledore intends. Harry felt numb. The revelations were coming too fast, each more disturbing than the last. Dumbledore hadn't just been tracking him, he'd been grooming him, shaping him into some kind of weapon against Voldemort. I need these spells off me, he said, his voice steadier than he expected. All of them. I concur, Snape said surprisingly. Though it must be done with extreme caution. 38 interlinked spells represent a significant magical influence. Removing them improperly could damage your core. Poppy is already working on a removal protocol, McGonagall assured them. But it will take time during which we must prevent Albus from discovering our knowledge or adding more spells. I may be able to assist with that, Snape said. There are potions that can temporarily mask magical signatures, making it more difficult to apply new spells. They won't hide what's already there, but they could prevent additions. That would be most helpful, Severus, McGonagall said, looking at him with new appreciation. Don't misunderstand me, Snape said coldly. I'm not doing this out of any affection for Potter. But I made a vow to protect him, and I will honor it, even against Albus Dumbledore. Harry stared at the potion's master in confusion. A vow? To who? Something like pain flashed across Snape's face before his expression shuddered completely. That is irrelevant to the current situation. Before Harry could press further, Hermione spoke up. We need a plan. We can't just avoid Professor Dumbledore forever, and we can't let him know we're suspicious. Indeed, Ms. Granger, McGonagall said. I suggest the following: you three will return to your normal schedules, acting as naturally as possible. Mr. Potter, you will visit Madame Pomfrey daily for follow-up treatments for your arm, during which she will gradually remove the spells. Severus will provide the masking potion and monitor the headmaster's awareness of our activities. And you, Professor? Ron asked. I will be making certain inquiries, McGonagall said carefully. About Mr. Potter's legal status and the circumstances surrounding his parents' death. And Sirius Black? Harry asked. McGonagall nodded. Yes. Though I must caution you all, this investigation must remain absolutely secret. If Albus suspects we're challenging his authority or questioning his plans for Mr. Potter, he has considerable resources at his disposal to stop us. We understand, Professor, Hermione said solemnly. Ron and Harry nodded in agreement. Very well, McGonagall said, rising. Then I suggest you three head to breakfast. Separately, to avoid arousing suspicion. Mr. Weasley first, then Ms. Granger, then Mr. Potter after a suitable interval. As they prepared to leave, Snape pulled Harry aside, his voice pitched low so the others couldn't hear. Potter, he said, his dark eyes intense, whatever I may think of your father, and I thought very little of him, no child deserves to be used as a pawn in an old man's war. Be vigilant. Trust carefully. And remember that even those who seem to despise you may be your allies in this. With that cryptic statement, Snape swept from the room, leaving Harry to wonder if the potion's master had just offered him some form of truce. The Great Hall was already buzzing with student activity when Harry finally entered. He forced himself to walk normally, to smile and nod at greetings, all while intensely aware of the high table where Dumbledore sat in his ornate chair, surveying the room with twinkling eyes. Did those eyes track Harry's movements more than others? Was that grandfatherly smile hiding calculation? Harry couldn't be sure, but the possibility made his skin crawl. He slid onto the bench beside Ron, across from Hermione, who was hidden behind a large book. Morning, he said, reaching for a piece of toast to give his hands something to do. Sleep well? Ron asked, the casual question carrying hidden meaning. Well enough, Harry replied, matching his tone. Arms still a bit sore, though. Madame Pomfrey will sort you out, Hermione said, lowering her book slightly. She said to come by after your morning classes. Harry nodded, understanding the real message. Their first spell removal session was scheduled. Mr. Potter, came a familiar voice from behind him. Harry turned to find Professor McGonagall standing there, her expression professionally neutral. A moment of your time after breakfast, if you please. Yes, Professor, Harry said, wondering if something had already gone wrong with their plan. McGonagall nodded and continued down the table, stopping to speak with a few other students as well, a natural pattern that wouldn't draw attention. What do you think that's about? Ron whispered. No idea, Harry muttered back. He didn't have long to wonder. As breakfast concluded, Harry made his way to McGonagall, who was waiting near the entrance to the Great Hall. This way, Mr. Potter, she said briskly, leading him to a nearby empty classroom. Once inside, her demeanor changed subtly. I've received word from Gringotts, she said without preamble. Your parents' will was never executed. What? Harry blinked in confusion. What does that mean? It means, McGonagall said grimly, that whatever provisions James and Lily made for your care were ignored. The will was sealed by the chief warlock of the Wizengamot immediately after their deaths. Dumbledore, Harry said, the pieces falling into place. Yes. Furthermore, the goblins inform me that there has been activity in your family vault that does not align with standard guardianship protocols. McGonagall's lips thinned to a nearly invisible line. Regular withdrawals, redirected to an account we haven't yet identified. Harry felt a surge of anger. He's been stealing from me too. We don't have proof yet of who authorized the withdrawals, McGonagall cautioned. But given everything else. It's him, Harry said with certainty. What else could be in the will? Besides who I was supposed to live with? I don't know, McGonagall admitted. James and Lily were private about their arrangements. But Gringotts may be persuaded to unseal the document with sufficient evidence of impropriety. Harry nodded, processing this new betrayal. What about my classes today? Can I still go? McGonagall gave him an approving look. Yes. Maintaining normalcy is crucial. But be aware that your first class is Defense Against the Dark Arts with Professor Quirrell. Given what we now suspect about him. I'll be careful, Harry promised. See that you are, McGonagall said, her voice softening slightly. Now off you go. Your friends will be waiting. As Harry hurried to catch up with Ron and Hermione, his mind whirled with all he'd learned in less than 24 hours. Dumbledore's manipulation went beyond magical tracking, it extended to Harry's entire life, from where he lived to who controlled his inheritance. Determination hardened within him. Whatever Dumbledore's grand plan was, whatever role he'd intended Harry to play unknowingly, things had changed now. Harry wasn't a puppet whose strings could be pulled without resistance. He'd find the truth. And then he'd decide his own fate. Defense Against the Dark Arts had never felt so uncomfortable. Harry sat between Ron and Hermione, trying not to stare at Professor Quirrell, who stuttered his way through a lecture on minor jinxes. Was Voldemort somehow possessing the nervous man with the perpetual turban? Was he aware of Harry watching him? Pay attention, Mr. Potter, Quirrell called suddenly, making Harry jump. The D difference between a J jinx and a H hex could save your L life one D-Day. Sorry, Professor, Harry mumbled, ducking his head to his notes. Beside him, Ron tensed, and on his other side, Hermione pressed her leg against his in silent support. Harry forced himself to focus on the lesson, but his thoughts kept drifting. If Quirrell was working for Voldemort, and Dumbledore knew but wasn't stopping him, then the headmaster was using the situation, using Harry, for some purpose. The tracking spells, the behavioral modifiers, they were meant to push Harry toward confronting Quirrell and whatever waited in the forbidden corridor. The realization made him feel sick. He'd come to Hogwarts believing he'd finally escaped being treated as less than human, only to discover he'd traded the Dursleys' obvious abuse for Dumbledore's more insidious manipulation. Harry, Hermione hissed, nudging him. Class is over. Harry blinked, realizing the other students were packing up. He hastily shoved his barely used parchment and quill into his bag. Mr. Potter, Quirrell called again as they moved toward the door. A W word, please. Ron and Hermione shot him alarmed looks. We'll wait outside, Ron said firmly, making it clear they wouldn't go far. Harry approached Quirrell's desk cautiously, hyper-aware of both his scar and the invisible spells covering his body. Why you seemed distracted today, Quirrell observed, his watery eyes fixed on Harry. Is that something troubling you? Just tired, Professor, Harry said, trying to sound normal. It was an exciting Halloween. Something flickered behind Quirrell's eyes, something that didn't match his nervous demeanor at all. Indeed. Fighting mountain T-trolls is not the usual first-year activity. Was it Harry's imagination, or did Quirrell emphasize the word fighting with something like approval? It was mostly luck, sir, Harry said, anxious to end the conversation. Quirrell tilted his head, studying Harry with an intensity that made his scar prickle uncomfortably. L luck, Mr. Potter. Or D destiny? Before Harry could respond to that strange question, the classroom door opened, and Professor Snape entered, his black robes billowing. Quirinus, Snape said silkily. The headmaster requests your presence. Immediately. Quirrell's expression flattened for a moment before his nervous smile returned. Of course, S. Severus. Mr. Potter, will continue this another tea time. Harry nodded and hurried from the room, not missing the significant look Snape gave him as he passed. Outside, Ron and Hermione were waiting anxiously. What did he want? Hermione whispered as they moved quickly down the corridor. I don't know, Harry replied honestly. He was asking weird questions about the troll. And something about destiny. Creepy, Ron muttered. You think Snape showing up was a coincidence? No way, Harry said. I think he was watching out for me. The idea of Snape protecting him still felt strange, but Harry was starting to accept that in this new reality where Dumbledore was an adversary, allies might come from unexpected places. We've got charms next, Hermione reminded them, checking her schedule. Then lunch, and then you're supposed to see Madame Pomfrey, Harry. Harry nodded, his stomach churning with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Today would be the first step toward removing Dumbledore's influence from his mind and magic. The hospital wing was empty when Harry arrived after lunch. Madame Pomfrey emerged from her office immediately, as if she'd been watching for him. Right on time, Mr. Potter, she said briskly. Let's get you settled. She led him not to one of the regular beds but through a door at the back of the wing that Harry had never noticed before. It opened into a smaller, private room with a single bed and various medical equipment. This is my treatment room for more complex cases, Pomfrey explained. It has additional privacy wards and magical dampeners to prevent interference with delicate procedures. Will removing the spells hurt? Harry asked, suddenly nervous. Pomfrey's expression softened. There may be some discomfort, but I'll be monitoring you closely. If anything becomes too intense, we'll pause immediately. Harry nodded and sat on the edge of the bed as directed. Before we begin, Pomfrey said, Professor Snape sent this for you. She handed Harry a small vial filled with a pearlescent blue liquid. It will make it more difficult for new spells to be placed on you while we're removing the old ones. Think of it as putting oil on your skin so new things can't stick as easily. Harry uncorked the vial and sniffed cautiously. It smelled like mint and something metallic. Bottoms up, I guess, he said, and swallowed the potion in one go. It tasted better than it smelled, cool and refreshing, with a tingling sensation that spread from his throat throughout his body. Good, Pomfrey said approvingly. Now, lie back and try to relax. I'll be using a specialized diagnostic spell first to map exactly how these enchantments are connected to your magical core. Harry lay down, focusing on keeping his breathing steady as Madame Pomfrey began a complex series of wand work above his body. Golden light emanated from her wand, forming an intricate web that hovered in the air between them. As Harry watched, certain strands of the web began to glow brighter, pulsing with different colors. What does it mean? He asked, fascinated despite his apprehension. Each color represents a different type of spell, Pomfrey explained, her concentration never wavering. Blue for tracking, red for behavioral modification, green for emotional influence, purple for memory adjustment. Harry stared at the web. There seemed to be an awful lot of red and green strands. These connections here, Pomfrey continued, gesturing to where multiple strands intertwined, show how the spells reinforce each other. It's quite sophisticated work. Breaking one could potentially strengthen others if done incorrectly. So which ones are you removing first? Harry asked. I'm starting with this cluster, Pomfrey said, pointing to a group of red strands near Harry's head. They appear to be influencing your perception of authority figures, making you more trusting of Dumbledore and less likely to question him. Harry nodded grimly. Get rid of them. Pomfrey took a deep breath, her expression becoming intensely focused. This may feel strange, Mr. Potter. A bit like someone pulling on a loose thread inside your mind. Try not to resist the sensation. She began another series of complex wand movements, murmuring incantations in a language Harry didn't recognize. The targeted red strands in the web began to vibrate, then glow brighter, almost painfully so. Harry felt an odd tugging sensation behind his eyes, followed by a pressure that built steadily until he had to grit his teeth against it. Just as it became nearly unbearable, there was a sudden snap, both in the visible web and inside Harry's head. The pressure vanished, replaced by a wave of dizziness and then, startlingly, clarity. Oh, Harry said softly, blinking as his vision refocused. The world seemed somehow sharper, more defined. What are you experiencing, Mr. Potter? Pomfrey asked, watching him intently. It's like Harry struggled to find the words. Like I've been seeing everything through a filter, and now it's gone. I can think more clearly about certain things. Pomfrey nodded, looking pleased. That's a good sign. The spell was subtly clouding your judgment regarding certain individuals and institutions. With it removed, you should be able to form more independent assessments. Harry thought about Dumbledore, the grandfatherly demeanor, the twinkling eyes, the air of benevolent wisdom. Without the spell's influence, he could now recognize how deliberately crafted that image was, how calculated to inspire trust and discourage questions. Can we do more? He asked eagerly. Pomfrey shook her head firmly. Not today. Removing even one such spell puts significant stress on your magical core. We need to proceed cautiously to avoid shock to your system. Harry wanted to argue but recognized the wisdom in her caution. How many sessions will it take to remove all 38? At least 10, possibly more, Pomfrey said. The deeper, older spells will require more care and time. But we've made an excellent start. She dispelled the golden web with a wave of her wand. How do you feel physically? Harry took inventory of his body. A bit tired. Slight headache. But otherwise okay. That's normal, Pomfrey assured him. Rest here for half an hour, then you may return to your dormitory. I recommend an early night tonight, your magic needs time to stabilize after this disruption. As Harry lay in the quiet treatment room, he found his thoughts turning to Dumbledore with new clarity. Without the compulsion to trust and admire the headmaster, he could examine their interactions more objectively. The coincidences that had characterized his first months at Hogwarts now seemed suspiciously orchestrated, Hagrid collecting him and the mysterious package on the same day, the warning about the third-floor corridor that practically screamed, "Investigate me," the mirror of Ariste accidentally discovered during his nighttime wanderings. It was all a setup, Harry realized with growing anger. An elaborate test designed to push him toward whatever confrontation Dumbledore had planned. And Harry had been following the script perfectly, never questioning why an 11-year-old boy should be facing such dangers in a school supposedly among the safest places in Britain. Well, that ended now. Whatever game Dumbledore was playing, Harry refused to be an unwitting pawn any longer. As Madame Pomfrey returned to check on him, Harry made a silent vow, he would free himself from every last one of Dumbledore's manipulations, discover the truth about his past and his parents, and then, only then, would he decide what role, if any, he would play in the coming conflict with Voldemort. For the first time since arriving in the wizarding world, Harry felt truly in control of his own destiny. The common room was crowded when Harry returned to Gryffindor Tower that evening. He spotted Ron and Hermione in a corner, heads bent together in intense conversation, and made his way toward them. How'd it go? Ron asked immediately as Harry dropped into the chair beside them. Weird, Harry admitted. But good, I think. She only removed one spell today, something about making me trust Dumbledore without question. Do you feel different? Hermione asked, studying him with academic interest. Yeah, actually, Harry said, keeping his voice low. It's like I can see things more clearly now. Especially about Dumbledore. Blimey, Ron breathed. That's kind of scary, isn't it? That he could just change how you think about someone. Harry nodded grimly. Exactly. And that's just one spell out of 38. Hermione bit her lip, looking troubled. I've been thinking about what Professor Snape said, about Quirrell and you-know-who and whatever's hidden in the third-floor corridor. What about it? Harry asked. Well, it's all connected, isn't it? The break-in at Gringotts on your birthday, the package Hagrid collected, the forbidden corridor. Hermione ticked off points on her fingers. Something valuable is being kept at Hogwarts, something Voldemort wants. And Dumbledore wants me to go after it, Harry concluded, the realization crystallizing with his newly clear thinking. The spells, the clues, dropped all term, he's been pushing me toward a confrontation with Quirrell and whatever he's hiding. But why? Ron asked, genuinely perplexed. You're just a kid. Why would Dumbledore want you to face you-know-who? The prophecy Snape mentioned, Hermione said quietly. It must be significant. Important enough that Dumbledore would risk Harry's life to fulfill it. Harry frowned, considering this. Snape said I'm supposed to have the power to vanquish Voldemort. Maybe Dumbledore is testing me? Seeing if I can actually do it? By setting you up against a possessed teacher when you've barely learned Wingardium Leviosa? Ron shook his head in disbelief. That's mental. It's worse than that, Hermione said, her expression darkening. If Professor Dumbledore knows Quirrell is possessed and is deliberately keeping him at Hogwarts, he's endangering every student here, not just Harry. Harry hadn't considered that angle. The idea that Dumbledore would risk hundreds of children for whatever scheme he was running made his blood boil. We need to know what's in that corridor, he said decisively. Not because Dumbledore wants us to investigate, but because it might tell us what he's really planning. Ron looked alarmed. You want to go to the third floor? After everything we just learned? Not right away, Harry clarified. First, I need more of these spells removed. I don't want to do anything that might be influenced by Dumbledore's compulsions. That's sensible, Hermione approved. In the meantime, I can research protective measures. If whatever's there is valuable enough for you-know-who to want it, there must be significant magical protections. And I'll ask my brothers about secret passages, Ron offered. Fred and George know this castle better than anyone. If there's another way into that corridor, they'd know it. Harry felt a surge of gratitude for his friends. They'd barely hesitated before throwing themselves into helping him, despite the dangers involved in opposing the most powerful wizard in Britain. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Percy Weasley, looking pompous in his prefect badge. Everything all right here? He asked, eyeing their huddled posture suspiciously. You three look like you're plotting something. Just discussing homework, Percy, Ron said, rolling his eyes. Hermione's helping us with charms. Percy seemed doubtful but nodded. Well, keep it down. Some people are trying to study. As he moved away, Harry leaned in closer to his friends. We need a safer place to talk. Somewhere private, where we won't be overheard. The library has some secluded corners, Hermione suggested. Too many people, Harry countered. And Madame Pants has ears like a bat. I might know a place, Ron said thoughtfully. Fred and George mentioned an abandoned classroom on the 4th floor that the teachers never check. We could meet there. Perfect, Harry said. Tomorrow after my session with Madame Pomfrey? His friends nodded in agreement. As they shifted to more innocent topics for the benefit of eavesdroppers, Harry found himself marveling at how much had changed in just over 24 hours. Yesterday, he'd been floating through Hogwarts in a haze of manufactured contentment, oblivious to the invisible chains binding him to Dumbledore's will. Now those chains were beginning to break, one by one. And with each broken link, Harry's resolve strengthened, he would never be anyone's puppet again. Chapter 2, Webs of Deception. November at Hogwarts brought biting winds that howled around the castle towers and rattled the windows of Gryffindor Tower. But the chill outside was nothing compared to the cold fury building inside Harry Potter as more of Dumbledore's spells were systematically removed. 3 weeks had passed since Madame Pomfrey's discovery of the 38 tracking and influence spells. 3 weeks of daily visits to the hospital wing, each resulting in the removal of 1 or 2 more enchantments. 3 weeks of increasing clarity and mounting evidence of just how thoroughly the headmaster had manipulated Harry's life. Hold still, Mr. Potter, Madame Pomfrey instructed, her wand moving in precise patterns above his prone form. Today marked his 15th session in the private treatment room, and they were targeting a particularly stubborn tracking spell linked to his emotional state. This one has deep roots. Harry gritted his teeth against the now familiar sensation of magical tugging. With each spell removed, the process became both easier and more difficult, easier because his magic was learning to cooperate with the removal, more difficult because the remaining spells were the oldest and most entrenched. There, Pomfrey said finally, satisfaction evident in her voice as the glowing strand in her diagnostic web snapped and dissipated. 17 down, 21 to go. Harry exhaled slowly, blinking as the room came back into focus. That one felt different. Madame Pomfrey nodded, making notes on her parchment. It was monitoring your emotional reactions to mentions of your parents. Particularly strong responses would have alerted the headmaster. A wave of revulsion washed over Harry. Even his grief for his parents hadn't been private. How many more sessions before they're all gone? He asked, sitting up slowly. At our current pace, another 3 weeks, Pomfrey said. But the deepest ones will require more recovery time between removals. We can't rush this, Mr. Potter. Harry nodded, trying not to show his impatience. Every day the spells remained felt like another day under Dumbledore's thumb, but he understood the medical necessity of proceeding cautiously. Has Professor Dumbledore asked about me? He asked, voicing the concern that had plagued him for weeks. Pomfrey's expression tightened. He's made casual inquiries about your recurring arm pain from the troll incident. I've assured him it's merely nerve regeneration requiring regular treatment. And he believed that? He appeared to, she said carefully. But Albus has always been skilled at hiding his true thoughts. Harry absorbed this, wondering if the headmaster suspected something. During meals in the Great Hall, he'd occasionally caught Dumbledore watching him with an expression that seemed less twinkling and more calculating than before. Was that actual suspicion, or was Harry simply seeing more clearly now that the trust compulsions were gone? Oh, Pomfrey added, Professor McGonagall asked me to tell you that she has information to share. She suggested your usual meeting place at 7 this evening. Their usual meeting place was the abandoned classroom on the 4th floor that Ron had mentioned. Over the past weeks, it had become their unofficial headquarters, protected by privacy charms Professor McGonagall had taught them. I'll be there, Harry promised, sliding off the examination table. Same time tomorrow? Yes, Pomfrey confirmed. And Mr. Potter? You're doing remarkably well with these removals. Most wizards twice your age would have struggled with the magical strain. Harry offered a small smile. Thanks. Sometimes being stubborn is an advantage. As he left the hospital wing, Harry felt the now familiar sensation of reorienting himself that followed each spell removal. It was as though he was constantly readjusting to seeing the world through clearer eyes, without the filters Dumbledore had imposed. Today's removal, the spell monitoring his emotional responses to his parents, left him feeling particularly raw, like a scab had been ripped away. The corridor was deserted as Harry made his way toward Gryffindor Tower. Classes had ended for the day, and most students were already at dinner. He'd grab Ron and Hermione afterward for their meeting with McGonagall. Potter. The voice from an alcove nearly made Harry jump out of his skin. Professor Snape emerged from the shadows, his dark eyes scanning the empty hallway before settling on Harry. Professor, Harry acknowledged, no longer feeling the instinctive dislike that had once characterized their interactions. With several of the behavioral modification spells removed, Harry had discovered that his antipathy towards Snape had been partially manufactured, though the potions master's own behavior didn't exactly inspire warm feelings. I trust today's procedure was successful? Snape asked, his voice low. Yes, sir. Another tracking spell gone. Snape nodded, his expression unreadable. The headmaster has scheduled a staff meeting for this evening. I believe you are the unstated topic of discussion. Harry tensed. Does he know? Not everything, Snape said. But he has noticed discrepancies in your behavior. You no longer seek his approval as consistently as before. Your eyes do not follow him with the same manufactured adoration. What should I do? Continue as you have been. Neither avoid him nor seek him out. Snape's lips thinned. I have provided the headmaster with a plausible alternative explanation for your changed demeanor, namely, that you are still processing the trauma of the troll attack and showing signs of delayed stress response. Harry blinked, surprised by Snape's foresight. "Thank you." Snape waved away the gratitude. "I am merely fulfilling my obligations." He hesitated, then added, "I have also completed the analysis of those potion samples you provided." This was a reference to the Dursleys' treatment, something Harry had reluctantly shared with their small group after one of the removals had cleared a memory suppression spell. He'd suddenly recalled Uncle Vernon forcing him to drink an odd-tasting liquid whenever he showed signs of accidental magic as a child. McGonagall had been horrified at the implication and asked Snape to analyze the samples they'd retrieved from Privet Drive. "And?" Harry prompted when Snape didn't continue. "Magic suppressants," Snape said, his disgust evident. "Crude but effective. Designed to temporarily dampen a child's magical core. Regular administration would have significantly hindered your magical development." Harry swallowed hard, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. "Dumbledore's idea? The formulation suggests professional brewing, yes. Far beyond your uncle's capabilities." Snape's eyes glittered with something that might have been anger. "Had they continued much longer, they could have permanently damaged your core." The implications were staggering. Not content with placing Harry with abusive relatives, Dumbledore had provided them with potions to suppress his magic, to keep him weak and ignorant of his heritage for as long as possible. What kind of weapon was the headmaster trying to forge through systematic neglect and abuse? "I should go," Harry said, feeling slightly ill. "Before someone sees us talking." Snape nodded sharply. "Indeed. One last thing. I have verified the security of the meeting location you've been using. It appears free from monitoring charms." With that, he swept away, leaving Harry to marvel at how thoroughly his understanding of Snape had been revised in recent weeks. The man was still caustic and unfair in class, maintaining his cover, but behind the scenes he'd become one of Harry's most valuable allies. The Great Hall was half empty by the time Harry arrived for dinner, most students having already eaten and departed. He spotted Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table, heads bent together in quiet conversation. They looked up as he approached, twin expressions of concern on their faces. "How'd it go?" Ron asked as Harry slid onto the bench beside him. "Another one gone," Harry replied, serving himself shepherd's pie. "And McGonagall wants to meet at 7. Hermione checked her watch. "That gives us less than an hour." "Plenty of time to eat," Ron said, already on his second helping. "Any side effects this time?" Harry shrugged, lowering his voice. "Just the usual disorientation. This one was monitoring how I react when people mention my parents." Hermione's eyes widened. "That's horrible. As if your grief should be observed." "That's Dumbledore for you," Ron muttered darkly. The past weeks had changed Ron perhaps even more than Harry. The revelation that the greatest wizard of their time, a man his entire family revered, had been manipulating his best friend had shaken Ron's faith in authority to its core. The loyalty compulsions found on Ron himself, though fewer than Harry's, had only deepened his sense of betrayal. "I ran into Snape on the way here," Harry said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "He says Dumbledore's called a staff meeting about me tonight." Hermione nearly dropped her fork. "He suspects something." "He's noticed I'm acting differently," Harry confirmed. "But Snape's given him a cover story about delayed trauma from the troll." "Clever," Ron admitted grudgingly, still not entirely comfortable with Snape as an ally. "Snape also confirmed the potions the Dursleys gave me were magic suppressants," Harry added, keeping his tone matter-of-fact. He'd learned that dwelling on the Dursleys' abuse only led to futile anger. Hermione's expression hardened. "So Dumbledore didn't just leave you with abusive relatives, he gave them tools to keep your magic weak." "Seems like it," Harry said, pushing his food around his plate. His appetite had diminished with the revelation. "It's all connected," Hermione said, her analytical mind working through the implications. "Keeping you ignorant of magic, placing spells to make you reckless and trusting of him, setting up the situation with the Philosopher's Stone. They had discovered what was hidden in the third-floor corridor 2 weeks earlier, thanks to Hermione's research and a slip from Hagrid about Nicholas Flamel. The idea that Dumbledore would bring such a powerful magical artifact into a school full of children, specifically to tempt Voldemort into a confrontation with Harry, had further cemented their determination to break free of his influence. "We should go," Ron said, noticing several professors leaving the high table. "If there's a staff meeting, we don't want to get caught in the corridors." They made their way to the 4th floor, careful to avoid the main hallways where they might encounter teachers. The abandoned classroom they'd claimed as their meeting space was dusty and disused, but they'd managed to clean up one corner and transfigure some broken furniture into serviceable chairs and a table. Professor McGonagall arrived precisely at 7, her face drawn with tension. She cast several privacy charms before speaking. "I've received concerning news from 2 fronts," she said without preamble, placing a leather portfolio on the table. "First, Gringotts has provided more detailed records of the withdrawals from the Potter vaults." She opened the portfolio to reveal a stack of parchments covered with columns of figures. "Regular withdrawals began the week after your parents' deaths," she explained, pointing to the earliest entries. 1,000 galleons monthly, transferred to an educational trust supposedly for your future schooling. "But that's not where it went," Harry guessed. "Indeed not," McGonagall confirmed grimly. "The trust exists on paper only. The actual funds were converted to Muggle currency and transferred to an account at Barclays Bank in London. From there, they become more difficult to trace, but the Goblins believe they ultimately funded various operations of the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's private organization against Voldemort." Harry stared at the figures, trying to process the magnitude of the theft. "He's been stealing my inheritance to fund his secret society. For 10 years. Approximately 120,000 galleons in total," McGonagall confirmed. "A significant sum, though fortunately only a fraction of the Potter estate." "That's..." Ron struggled to find words, his face pale. As someone from a family that had always struggled financially, the amount seemed astronomical to him. "Criminal," Hermione finished firmly. "It's theft, plain and simple." "It is," McGonagall agreed. "Though proving it would be challenging, given Dumbledore's position and influence." "You mentioned 2 fronts," Harry reminded her, forcing himself to set aside the anger over the theft for now. "What's the other news?" McGonagall's expression became even more grave. "I've been researching your godfather's case through Ministry archives. It's been difficult to access the records without arousing suspicion, but what I've found is deeply troubling." She withdrew another document from her portfolio. "Sirius Black never received a trial." "What?" Hermione gasped. "But that's unconstitutional." "The wizarding world doesn't have a constitution, Ms. Granger," McGonagall said dryly. "But yes, it violates all standard judicial procedures. He was captured at the scene of the explosion that killed 13 people, summarily declared guilty based on circumstantial evidence, and shipped to Azkaban without a hearing of any kind. Why would Dumbledore allow that?" Harry asked, struggling to understand the implications. "If Black was my godfather." "That's precisely the point," McGonagall said. "As your godfather, Sirius Black had legal claim to your guardianship. Had he been given a trial, even if found guilty, the terms of your parents' will would have been examined to determine alternative arrangements. Which Dumbledore didn't want," Harry concluded, the pieces falling into place. "Because he wanted me with the Dursleys, isolated and abused." McGonagall nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I fear that's the case. And there's something else." She hesitated before continuing. "I found evidence suggesting that Peter Pettigrew, the man Black supposedly murdered, may have been your parents' actual secret keeper, not Black as widely believed." This revelation meant little to Harry, who was still learning about the circumstances of his parents' death, but Hermione gasped. "If Pettigrew was the secret keeper, then he was the one who betrayed the Potters to Voldemort," she explained for Harry and Ron's benefit. "Not Sirius Black." "But Pettigrew is dead," Ron objected. Black blew him up, there were witnesses. All they found was a finger, McGonagall said. And the witnesses were muggles, confused by memory charms in the aftermath. The case against Black was built entirely on assumptions and prejudice against his family name. Harry felt dizzy with the implications. If Sirius Black was innocent, he'd spent a decade in the wizarding prison for a crime he didn't commit, and Harry had spent the same decade with the Dursleys instead of with his rightful guardian. "Can we get him a trial now?" he asked, hope rising despite his attempt to remain pragmatic. "Clear his name." "It won't be simple," McGonagall cautioned. "We would need compelling new evidence, and approaching the Ministry directly would alert Dumbledore immediately." "But..." She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Yes, I believe we can. With the right strategy." "What's the first step?" Hermione asked, already pulling out parchment to take notes. "We need to locate Peter Pettigrew," McGonagall said. "If he's alive, as I suspect, finding him would undermine the entire case against Black. But how do we find someone who's been dead for 10 years? Ron asked, bewildered. "I have a theory," McGonagall said, "but it requires confirmation." She turned to Ron. "Mr. Weasley, this may seem an odd question, but could you tell me about your pet rat?" Ron blinked in confusion. "Scabbers? What about him? How long has he been in your family?" "Dunno exactly. Percy had him first, found him in the garden when I was about 3, so, maybe 10 years ago." Ron's brow furrowed. "Why? And does this rat have any unusual characteristics? Missing toes, perhaps?" Ron's eyes widened. "Yeah, actually. His front paw, one toe's missing. Always has been. Percy used to say it made him distinguished." His voice rose in alarm. "Professor, why are you asking about Scabbers?" McGonagall took a deep breath. "Because Peter Pettigrew was an unregistered animagus. His form was a rat. And the only part of his body found after the explosion was a finger," Hermione whispered, her face draining of color. The silence that followed was deafening. Harry stared at Ron, whose freckles stood out starkly against his suddenly pale face. "Are you saying," Ron said slowly, his voice strangled, "that I've been sleeping in the same room as the bloke who betrayed Harry's parents? For months." "It's a possibility we must investigate," McGonagall said cautiously. "A rat living 10 years is highly unusual, they typically live 3 or 4 at most. And the timing of his appearance in your garden. Right after Pettigrew supposedly died," Hermione concluded. Harry felt a surge of anger and determination. "We need to capture him. If Scabbers really is Pettigrew, we can prove Sirius Black is innocent." "Precisely," McGonagall agreed. "But we must proceed with extreme caution. If Pettigrew suspects we know his identity, he'll flee, or worse." "He's in our dormitory right now," Ron said, looking queasy. "Just, sleeping in his cage on my bedside table." "I suggest we act tonight," McGonagall said decisively. "The staff meeting will occupy Dumbledore and most of the professors for at least 2 hours. It gives us a window to secure Pettigrew without interference." "How do we prove he's not just a rat?" Harry asked. "There's a spell, Animagus Revelio, that forces an animagus back into human form," McGonagall explained. "As a registered animagus myself, I can perform it legally." "Then what?" Hermione pressed. "Once we've exposed him, what do we do with him?" "I have contacts in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement who can be trusted," McGonagall said. "People who owe me favors and have no particular loyalty to Dumbledore. We'll secure Pettigrew, document his capture thoroughly, and then present the evidence formally." The plan took shape quickly after that. Ron would return to the dormitory and retrieve Scabbers, claiming he needed to take the rat to Hagrid for a health concern. He would bring the rat to an unused classroom in the dungeons, where McGonagall would perform the revealing spell. If Scabbers proved to be Pettigrew, they would bind him magically and contact McGonagall's allies in the DMLE. One last thing, McGonagall said as they prepared to implement the plan. Should Pettigrew be exposed, we must keep him away from Dumbledore at all costs. If the headmaster realizes we've discovered his machinations regarding Sirius Black, he'll make Pettigrew disappear, Harry finished grimly. To protect himself. McGonagall nodded, her expression hardened with resolve. Precisely. Now, Mr. Weasley, are you ready? Ron squared his shoulders, his initial shock giving way to determination. Ready, Professor. That rat's been eating my food and sleeping in my bed for months. If he's really the reason Harry's parents died. He didn't finish the sentence, but the fierce look in his eyes said enough. The dungeons were eerily silent as Harry, Hermione, and Professor McGonagall waited in the designated classroom. They had arrived separately to avoid drawing attention, and now stood in tense silence, the only light coming from McGonagall's wand. Ron should have been here by now, Hermione whispered, checking her watch for the third time in as many minutes. Give him time, Harry murmured, though anxiety gnawed at his stomach. The common room might have been crowded. McGonagall stood by the door, her posture alert. Someone's coming, she said suddenly, raising her wand. The door creaked open, revealing Ron's freckled face, pinched with tension. He slipped inside, clutching a squirming cloth bag. Sorry I'm late, he gasped, breathing hard. Percy cornered me, wanted to know why I was taking Scabbers out after curfew. Had to make up some story about him looking peaky. You weren't followed? McGonagall asked sharply. No, Professor. Checked 3 times. Ron held up the wriggling bag. He's been trying to escape ever since I picked him up. Never done that before. Interesting, McGonagall said, her suspicion clearly growing. Place him on the desk, please, Mr. Weasley. Ron set the bag down and carefully opened it. Scabbers shot out immediately, making a desperate dash for freedom, but McGonagall's wand flashed with practiced precision. Immobilis. The rat froze mid-leap, suspended in the air. McGonagall levitated him gently onto the desk, then cast several complex detection spells that made the air around Scabbers shimmer with colored light. Well? Harry asked anxiously. McGonagall's expression hardened. This is definitely an animagus, not a common rat. The magical signature is unmistakable. Ron made a gagging sound. I let him sleep on my pillow. Stand back, all of you, McGonagall ordered, raising her wand again. Animagus revelio. A burst of blue light erupted from her wand, enveloping the immobilized rat. For a moment, nothing happened, then Scabbers began to change, his small form expanding and contorting grotesquely. Limbs elongated, fur receded, and within seconds, a man lay sprawled across the desk, still frozen by the immobilization charm. He was short and pudgy, with thinning hair and a pointed face that retained rat-like qualities. His clothes were ragged and filthy, his nails long and yellowed. Most distinctly, his right hand was missing the index finger. Peter Pettigrew, McGonagall said coldly, her wand trained steadily on the man's chest. Alive after all these years. That's him. Harry stared at the frozen figure, this man who had betrayed his parents to their deaths. He'd imagined someone more, menacing. Pettigrew looked pathetic, more vermin than villain. Incarcerus, McGonagall cast, and thick ropes wound around Pettigrew's immobile form. Only then did she release the freezing charm, allowing him consciousness but not movement. Pettigrew's small, watery eyes darted frantically around the room, widening in terror when they landed on Harry. Harry, he squeaked, his voice rusty from disuse. James's boy, how you've grown. White-hot anger surged through Harry. Don't you dare speak my father's name. You don't understand, Pettigrew babbled, struggling against his bonds. I had no choice. The Dark Lord, you have no idea the weapons he possesses. Silencio, McGonagall snapped, and Pettigrew's voice cut off abruptly. We'll hear your excuses before the Wiesengemot, Pettigrew, not here. She turned to the three students, her expression grave. This is more significant than we realized. Pettigrew bears the dark mark. The what? Harry asked. Voldemort's brand on his followers, Hermione explained quietly. All Death Eaters have it on their left forearm. McGonagall nodded. Which confirms he was a willing servant, not a victim as commonly believed. She withdrew a small mirror from her robes. I need to contact my associates in the DMLE immediately. This changes everything. As McGonagall stepped away to use the mirror, Harry approached Pettigrew, studying the man who had destroyed his family. Up close, the fear in Pettigrew's eyes was even more apparent, but there was calculation there too, a rat's cunning seeking escape. My parents trusted you, Harry said quietly, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. They made you their secret keeper. And you sold them to Voldemort. Pettigrew couldn't respond through the silencing charm, but his eyes darted away, unable to meet Harry's gaze. You framed my godfather, Harry continued. Let him rot in Azkaban for a decade while you lived as a pet, fed and sheltered by the Weasleys. Tears leaked from Pettigrew's eyes now, tears of self-pity, Harry suspected, not remorse. Harry, Hermione said gently, placing a hand on his arm. Step back. Professor McGonagall is coming back. McGonagall returned, looking grimly satisfied. Amelia Bones will be here within 20 minutes with a small team of trusted Aurors. She's bypassing the standard protocols to maintain secrecy. Madame Bones? Ron said. Susan's aunt. Isn't she the head of the whole department? Indeed, McGonagall confirmed. And one of the few ministry officials who cannot be bought or intimidated. She's also been skeptical of certain decisions made during the aftermath of the war, including Black's imprisonment without trial. The wait for Madame Bones seemed interminable. Pettigrew's eyes never stopped moving, searching for any opportunity to escape. Harry found he couldn't look away from the man, this living embodiment of betrayal who had hidden in plain sight for so long. Finally, a soft knock at the door signaled the arrival of the DMLE contingent. McGonagall verified their identities before admitting three people, a square-jawed witch with a monocle who could only be Amelia Bones, a tall black wizard with a gold earring, and a grizzled older Auror with numerous scars. Minerva, Madame Bones greeted, her gaze immediately finding Pettigrew. I see your information was accurate. Peter Pettigrew, alive and well. Order of Merlin, First Class, the scarred Auror growled. Awarded posthumously for heroism. What a joke. Kingsley, Alastair, secure the prisoner, Bones directed. Class 5 restraints, anti-animagus cuffs, and continuous monitoring. The two Aurors moved with practiced efficiency, replacing McGonagall's bonds with more sophisticated magical restraints. Pettigrew's silent struggles grew more desperate. Mr. Potter, Bones said, turning to Harry. I understand this situation affects you most directly. I give you my personal assurance that Peter Pettigrew will stand trial for his crimes, all of them. And Sirius Black? Harry asked, meeting her steady gaze. If the evidence confirms what I suspect, he will receive the trial he was denied 10 years ago, Bones promised. Justice has been delayed, but it need not be denied any longer. What happens now? Hermione asked. Won't Professor Dumbledore notice when you take Pettigrew away? Bones and McGonagall exchanged significant looks. The headmaster is otherwise occupied, Bones said carefully. An urgent ICW matter required his immediate attention, in Geneva. You manufactured an emergency to get him out of the castle, Harry realized, impressed despite himself. Let's say certain information was prioritized for his attention, Bones replied with the ghost of a smile. It gives us approximately 12 hours to process Pettigrew and initiate proceedings for Black's retrieval from Azkaban before Albus returns. You knew, Hermione said suddenly, looking at McGonagall. You already suspected Scabbers was Pettigrew before today. McGonagall inclined her head. I had growing suspicions based on my research. When I connected the timing of Pettigrew's death with the appearance of an unusually long-lived rat in the Weasley household, I contacted Amelia. We've been planning this intervention for several days. Why didn't you tell us? Ron asked, sounding hurt. Plausible deniability, the Auror called Kingsley explained, his deep voice resonating in the small classroom. If you were questioned about your rat's disappearance before we confirmed his identity, your genuine confusion would be more convincing. We needed to ensure Pettigrew couldn't escape again, McGonagall added. The fewer people who knew the full plan, the better. Harry could understand the logic, even if the secrecy stung a little. After all they'd learned about Dumbledore's manipulations, a little caution from their allies was understandable. What about the headmaster? He asked. When he returns and discovers what's happened. Leave Albus to me, Bones said firmly. His political influence is considerable, but even he cannot simply make a living Peter Pettigrew disappear, not when properly documented by the DMLE. The scarred Auror, Alastair, Bones had called him, gave a harsh laugh. Albus has escaped proper scrutiny for too long. Might be time someone reminded him that even the chief warlock isn't above the law. We should proceed, Bones said, checking her watch. The sooner Pettigrew is secured at the ministry, the better. As the Aurors prepared to transport their prisoner, Pettigrew's eyes locked with Harry's one final time. The naked desperation there almost inspired pity, almost, but not quite. This man had sentenced Harry's parents to death and his godfather to a living hell. Whatever happened to Peter Pettigrew now, justice demanded accountability. Mr. Potter, Bones said, pausing at the door. I understand Madame Pomfrey has been treating you for lingering effects from the troll incident. The careful phrasing told Harry that Bones knew about the spells. McGonagall must have shared that information as well. Yes, ma'am, he replied cautiously. Bones nodded. I would be interested in receiving copies of her medical documentation. For potential future proceedings. The implication was clear. The evidence of Dumbledore's unauthorized spells might eventually be used against him, just as Pettigrew's capture would be used to free Sirius Black. I'll make sure she sends them, Harry promised. After the DMLE contingent departed with their prisoner, an odd quiet fell over the classroom. Ron sank into a chair, looking shell-shocked. I can't believe I've been carrying around the bloke who betrayed your parents for months, he said hollowly. Feeding him treats, letting him sleep in my bloody bed. You couldn't have known, Harry assured him, though he understood Ron's horror. None of us could. McGonagall checked her watch. The staff meeting should be concluding soon. You three should return to Gryffindor Tower immediately. What will you tell the headmaster when he returns? Hermione asked, gathering her things. As little as possible, McGonagall said grimly. Though I suspect Amelia will ensure news of Pettigrew's capture reaches Albus before he returns to Hogwarts. His reaction should be informative. As they made their way back to Gryffindor Tower under McGonagall's escort, Harry found his mind racing with possibilities. If Sirius Black was innocent, if he was freed, would he still want to be Harry's guardian? Would Harry finally have a proper home, away from the Dursleys? It seemed too much to hope for, after years of disappointment. Yet for the first time since discovering the spells on his person, Harry felt a flickering of optimism about his future. The news broke in the Daily Prophet the next morning with unprecedented speed. Peter Pettigrew found alive. Sirius Black's guilt-questioned emergency Wisengamot session called the Great Hall erupted with shocked conversations as students and staff alike digested the front-page story, complete with a photo of a shackled Pettigrew being led into the ministry. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged significant looks but said nothing, aware that drawing attention to themselves now would be dangerous. The headmaster's chair remained conspicuously empty throughout breakfast. Professor McGonagall presided over the meal in his absence, her expression revealing nothing. Look at Snape, Hermione whispered, nodding subtly toward the high table. Harry glanced up to see the potions master reading the prophet with unusual intensity, his knuckles white where he gripped the paper. As if sensing Harry's gaze, Snape looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. After a moment, he gave a nearly imperceptible nod before returning to his reading. He's pleased, Harry realized. About Black being innocent. Weird, Ron muttered. Thought they hated each other at school. Their speculation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor McGonagall at their table. Mr. Potter, she said formally, the headmaster requests your presence in his office following breakfast. Harry's stomach dropped. He's back, then. Indeed. The password is Sugar Quill. With that, she moved on, maintaining the appearance of a routine message delivery. He knows, Hermione whispered once McGonagall was out of earshot. About our involvement with Pettigrew. Maybe, Harry conceded, forcing himself to finish his toast despite his vanished appetite. Or maybe he just wants to gauge my reaction to the news. What are you going to say? Ron asked anxiously. Harry considered the question. The truth, mostly. That I'm shocked Pettigrew is alive and hoping my godfather gets a fair trial. He gave a grim smile. Just not the whole truth. Hermione bit her lip. Be careful, Harry. Without all the spells removed, you're still vulnerable to his influence. I know, Harry assured her. I'll keep my occlumency shields up like Snape showed me. The rudimentary mental defenses Snape had begun teaching Harry after their discovery of the memory modification spells weren't strong enough to block a determined legilimency attack, but they might prevent casual surface reading, enough to hide their full knowledge of Dumbledore's manipulations. After breakfast, Harry made the now familiar journey to the headmaster's office, each step feeling heavier than the last. The gargoyle guarding the entrance leapt aside at the password, and the spiral staircase carried him upward to the ornate door. Enter, Harry, Dumbledore called before he could knock. The headmaster's office looked the same as always, silver instruments whirring on tables, portraits of former headmasters dozing in their frames, Fawkes the Phoenix perched majestically beside the desk. Dumbledore himself sat behind the massive desk, his silver beard neatly arranged, his half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose. But something had changed. Whether it was the removal of the trust compulsions or simply Harry's new awareness, he could now see the calculation behind the twinkling eyes, the careful staging of the grandfatherly image. Ah, Harry, thank you for coming, Dumbledore said warmly, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Lemon drop? No, thank you, sir, Harry replied, sitting straight-backed in the offered chair. He kept his expression politely neutral, fighting both the artificial trust the remaining spells tried to impose and his own growing anger at the man before him. I imagine you've seen this morning's rather extraordinary news, Dumbledore said, indicating a copy of the Prophet on his desk. Yes, sir. About Peter Pettigrew being found alive. Dumbledore studied him over his spectacles. And how do you feel about this development? Harry chose his words carefully. Confused, mostly. Everyone told me Sirius Black betrayed my parents, but if Pettigrew faked his death. Indeed, Dumbledore said gravely. It seems we may have all been deceived by Peter's cunning performance. He sighed heavily, the very picture of a wise man reconsidering a grave error. I must confess, I myself never questioned Sirius's guilt. The evidence seemed so overwhelming at the time. The performance was masterful, Harry had to admit. Had the trust compulsion still been in full effect, he would have been moved by the headmaster's apparent candor and humility. Now, he recognized it as damage control, Dumbledore positioning himself as another victim of Pettigrew's deception rather than an active participant in the miscarriage of justice. What happens now, sir? Harry asked, keeping to his role of the curious, somewhat naive student. Will my godfather be released? A flicker of something, annoyance. Concern, passed behind Dumbledore's eyes at Harry's use of the term godfather, but his benevolent smile never wavered. The Wisingamot has called an emergency session to review the case, he said. As chief warlock, I will naturally recuse myself from the proceedings, given my previous involvement. But yes, if the evidence supports Peter's guilt, Sirius will likely be released from Azkaban. And then what? Harry pressed, unable to completely hide his eagerness. Will he be cleared to be my guardian, like my parents wanted? Dumbledore's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. That is a complex legal question, Harry. Sirius has spent 10 years in Azkaban, exposed to Dementors daily. His mental state may not be conducive to guardianship responsibilities. And there are the blood wards at your aunt's home to consider, the protection your mother's sacrifice provides. But sir, Harry countered, if my parents named Sirius as my guardian in their will. Ah, Dumbledore interjected smoothly, but your parents' will was sealed after their deaths, as is standard procedure when the heir is a minor without a magical guardian present. The exact provisions regarding secondary guardianship were never formally established. It was a lie, Harry knew. The will had been sealed by Dumbledore himself, not by standard procedure. But calling out the deception now would reveal too much. Could the will be unsealed now, sir? He asked instead. Since I'm at Hogwarts and have a magical guardian? Dumbledore's eyes narrowed slightly. Who told you that you have a magical guardian, Harry? Harry realized his mistake too late. He wasn't supposed to know that the headmaster served as temporary magical guardian to Muggle-raised students. I read about it in the library, he improvised. Hermione found a book about wizarding custodial law. Said Hogwarts students from Muggle families get temporary magical guardians while they're at school. Ah, Ms. Granger's thoroughness strikes again, Dumbledore said with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, as headmaster, I do serve as your magical guardian during the school year. However, unsealing a will is a lengthy legal process, requiring numerous approvals from the Department of Magical Inheritance. Another lie, but Harry nodded as if accepting the explanation. I understand, sir. I've never had any family who actually wanted me. If Sirius Black is innocent and he wanted to be my guardian. He let his voice trail off, allowing his genuine longing for family to show. It wasn't entirely an act, despite everything he'd learned about Dumbledore's manipulations, the hope of living with his godfather instead of the Dursleys burned bright. Dumbledore's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. Your desire for family is entirely natural, Harry. But we must proceed cautiously. Sirius will need time to recover from his ordeal, and there are legal complexities to consider. In the meantime, the protection offered by your mother's blood magic remains your strongest defense against those who would harm you. Translation: Dumbledore would fight to keep Harry at the Dursleys, regardless of Sirius's legal rights or Harry's wishes. Yes, sir, Harry said, lowering his eyes to hide the anger that threatened to break through his carefully maintained facade. Now, Dumbledore said, changing the subject, Professor McGonagall tells me you've been receiving ongoing treatment from Madame Pomfrey for complications from the Halloween incident. How are you feeling? The abrupt shift caught Harry off guard. Better, sir. Madame Pomfrey says the nerve damage is healing well. Excellent, Dumbledore beamed. Though I must say, you appear to have lost some of your enthusiasm since the term began. Professor McGonagall mentioned you've been more withdrawn, less engaged in class. Is something troubling you beyond the troll encounter? The question was carefully casual, but Harry sensed the probing behind it. Dumbledore had indeed noticed the behavioral changes resulting from the spell removals. I've just been thinking a lot, Harry replied, which was true enough. About my parents, Voldemort, everything that happened. Sometimes it's hard to focus on schoolwork when you realize someone tried to kill you as a baby. Dumbledore nodded sagely. A heavy burden for one so young. Perhaps I could be of assistance. There are therapeutic magics that can help process traumatic memories, make them less intrusive. Alarm bells rang in Harry's mind. Was Dumbledore offering to add new compulsion spells disguised as therapy? That's kind of you, sir, Harry said carefully, but Madame Pomfrey has already suggested some techniques that seem to be helping. Frustration flashed briefly across Dumbledore's face before his genial mask returned. Very well. But my door is always open should you change your mind. Thank you, sir, Harry said, rising from his chair, sensing the conversation was concluding. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss? Just one small matter, Dumbledore said, his tone deceptively light. It seems Mr. Weasley's pet rat has gone missing. A trivial thing, perhaps, but curious timing, wouldn't you say? Harry forced his expression to remain puzzled rather than panicked. Scabbers? Ron mentioned he'd disappeared yesterday. You think it's connected to Pettigrew somehow? Dumbledore studied him intently. What an interesting leap of logic, Harry. Well, it's just. The timing, like you said, Harry backtracked, mentally kicking himself. And rats aren't exactly rare. Indeed, Dumbledore murmured. Well, I'm sure Mr. Weasley will find a suitable replacement pet. You may go, Harry. And do remember, I am here if you need guidance of any kind. Harry nodded and turned to leave, feeling Dumbledore's eyes boring into his back all the way to the door. Only when he was safely down the spiral staircase did he allow himself to exhale the breath he'd been holding. The interview had confirmed his worst fears. Dumbledore knew something was amiss. He didn't seem aware of the spell removal specifically, but he'd definitely noticed Harry's changed behavior and was already moving to counter it, both by trying to maintain control over Harry's living situation and by offering therapeutic magic that would likely reinstate the removed compulsions. More urgently, the questions about Scabbers suggested Dumbledore suspected their involvement in Pettigrew's capture. That was dangerous ground indeed. Harry needed to warn the others. The game had just become significantly more complicated. He knows, Harry said without preamble, sliding into the seat beside Hermione in the library where she and Ron had been waiting. Not everything, but enough to be suspicious. How could he? Ron whispered, looking around nervously despite the privacy charm Hermione had cast around their table. We were careful. The timing is too convenient, Hermione pointed out. Pettigrew is captured the same night Dumbledore is called away, and Scabbers disappears from Gryffindor Tower. He'd have to be an idiot not to make the connection. And whatever else Dumbledore is, he's not an idiot, Harry agreed grimly. He specifically asked about Scabbers. What did you tell him? Hermione asked. Played dumb, Harry said. Pretended I was just as confused about the rat going missing. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. But I slipped up, mentioned Pettigrew when he hadn't connected them explicitly. He noticed. Bloody hell, Ron muttered, his freckles standing out against his pale face. Language, Hermione chided automatically. What else happened? Harry recounted the rest of the conversation, including Dumbledore's obvious reluctance to see Sirius become Harry's guardian and the offer of therapeutic magic. He was trying to add new compulsion spells, Hermione concluded, her expression darkening. Disguised as trauma treatment. Probably, Harry agreed. But I turned him down, said Madame Pomfrey was already helping me. Smart, Ron approved. What do we do now? Continue with the spell removals, Harry said firmly. We've got 21 more to go. The sooner they're all off, the better. And Sirius Black? Hermione asked. If the Wizengamot clears him, Dumbledore will still fight to keep you with the Dursleys. Then we fight back, Harry said, determination hardening his voice. McGonagall said Gringotts might unseal my parents' will with enough evidence of impropriety. The records of those illegal withdrawals from my vault could be enough. Plus the spells Pomfrey's been documenting, Ron added. Got to count for something, 38 illegal enchantments. Hermione nodded thoughtfully. We should compile everything we know about Dumbledore's manipulations, the financial records, the medical documentation, the circumstantial evidence about Sirius's case. Build a comprehensive file. To use against him if necessary, Harry agreed. But only as a last resort. Right now, I'd rather he underestimate how much we know. A shadow fell across their table, breaking their huddle. Looking up, Harry was startled to see Professor Snape looming over them, his expression inscrutable as always. "Mr. Potter," Snape said coldly, maintaining his public persona. "The headmaster has asked me to provide you with a calming draft. He seems to believe you are experiencing anxiety related to recent news events." He extended a small vial of pale blue liquid, distinctly different from the standard calming draft's lavender color. Harry hesitated, unsure if this was a genuine message from Snape or a trap from Dumbledore. "The color's wrong for a calming draft, sir," he said cautiously. Something like approval flickered in Snape's eyes. 5 points to Gryffindor for basic potions knowledge, Potter. This is a modified formulation, gentler on the digestive system. The emphasis on modified suggested this was indeed Snape's own message. Harry accepted the vial with a nod. "Thank you, sir." Snape inclined his head slightly. "The headmaster also suggested I remind you of tonight's astronomy lesson. The stars are particularly revealing this evening." With that cryptic statement, he swept away, his black robes billowing behind him. "What was that about?" Ron asked once Snape was out of earshot. "You don't have astronomy tonight." "It's a message," Hermione said, eyes widening with realization. "The potion isn't from Dumbledore at all." Harry carefully unstoppered the vial and detected a familiar minty scent, the same as the anti-tracking potion he'd been taking regularly. "It's the masking potion," he confirmed. "But stronger, I think." "And the astronomy comment." "He wants to meet us," Hermione concluded. "Tonight, at the astronomy tower." "But why there?" Ron frowned. "It's so exposed." "Because it's the last place anyone would expect a secret meeting," Harry reasoned. "Everyone knows Snape hates the astronomy tower." "Clever," Hermione admitted. "So we go tonight?" Harry nodded, pocketing the vial. "After dinner. I'll take this just before. If it's stronger than the regular version, maybe it'll block any new tracking spells Dumbledore tries to add." "This is getting dangerous," Ron said, his expression unusually serious. "Dumbledore's suspicious, Snape's passing secret messages. Feels like we're in some kind of spy novel." "Welcome to my life," Harry said dryly, though the gravity of their situation wasn't lost on him. They were first years opposing the most powerful wizard in Britain, a man who'd spent decades crafting his reputation as a benevolent leader while secretly manipulating events from the shadows. But for the first time, Harry wasn't facing such dangers alone. Between his friends, McGonagall, Pomfrey, Snape, and now potentially Amelia Bones and Sirius Black, he had allies willing to help him break free of Dumbledore's control. That made all the difference. The astronomy tower was deserted when they arrived that evening, the telescopes covered and the observation deck silent under the November stars. A bitter wind whistled through the battlements, making them huddle deeper into their cloaks. "Are we sure about this?" Ron whispered, his breath fogging in the cold air. Snape's message was pretty vague. "We're sure," Harry replied, scanning the shadows for any sign of the potion's master. "If it was a trap, Dumbledore wouldn't be this subtle." A soft footfall behind them made all three whirl around, wands raised. Professor Snape emerged from the stairwell, his dark eyes quickly assessing the empty tower. "Adequate caution," he noted approvingly. "Though your wand work could use improvement, Weasley. You're holding it like a beater's bat." Ron flushed but adjusted his grip without comment. "Sir," Hermione began hesitantly, "your message was necessary given the headmaster's increased scrutiny," Snape cut in, his voice low. "He suspects something, though not the full extent of our activities. Yet. That matches what I sensed during our meeting," Harry said. Snape nodded sharply. "He has increased the monitoring charms throughout the castle, particularly around the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey has been forced to postpone your next spell removal session until safer arrangements can be made." Harry's heart sank. "For how long?" "Unknown," Snape admitted. "But there are alternatives being arranged." He reached into his robes and withdrew a small leather pouch. In the meantime, take this. A more potent version of the masking potion, developed specifically to counter the headmaster's detection methods. Harry accepted the pouch, feeling the weight of several vials inside. Thank you, sir. Thanks aren't necessary, Snape said curtly. Self-preservation is motivation enough. If Albus discovers my role in this. He let the sentence hang unfinished. Professor, Hermione ventured, what do you know about Sirius Black's case? The newspapers say the Wisengamot is reviewing the evidence tomorrow. Something complicated passed across Snape's features, old hatred mingled with reluctant justice. Black and I were enemies at school, he said stiffly. But even I found his alleged betrayal difficult to reconcile with his obsessive loyalty to your father, Potter. As for tomorrow's hearing, Amelia Bones has built a compelling case based on Pettigrew's capture and new evidence regarding the secret keeper arrangement. Will it be enough? Harry asked, unable to keep the hope from his voice. Likely, Snape conceded. Particularly with the additional testimony Lupin has provided. Lupin? Harry echoed, unfamiliar with the name. Remus Lupin. Another of your father's friends. Snape's lip curled slightly. He was part of their inner circle and knew about the switch to Pettigrew as secret keeper. His testimony corroborates Black's version of events. Then why didn't he speak up 10 years ago? Ron asked, frowning. A question many are asking, Snape replied. Including, I suspect, Black himself. He checked his pocket watch. We've remained here too long already. The potion instructions are in the pouch, follow them precisely. 1 vial daily, taken at sunrise. Sir, Harry said as Snape turned to leave, there's something else you should know. Dumbledore offered me therapeutic magic to help with supposed trauma from the troll incident. Snape stilled, his expression hardening. Declined, I hope. Of course, Harry confirmed. But it shows he's getting desperate to reinstate control. Indeed. Snape considered this new information. Be vigilant, Potter. The headmaster rarely accepts defeat gracefully. If he cannot secure your compliance through magic, he will seek other methods. Like what? Hermione asked, worry evident in her voice. Isolation. Misdirection. Creating circumstances where you have no choice but to turn to him for protection. Snape's dark eyes fixed on Harry. He still believes you are crucial to his plans regarding the Dark Lord. He will not relinquish that control easily. With those ominous words, Snape departed, leaving the 3 students alone with the cold night air and colder realizations. Cheerful bloke, isn't he? Ron muttered, breaking the tense silence. He's not wrong though, Harry said quietly. Dumbledore's had 10 years to plan whatever he wants me to do about Voldemort. He won't just give up because we've discovered a few of his manipulations. Then we need to be prepared, Hermione said resolutely. Not just for whatever he might do next, but for what happens if, when, Sirius is freed. That changes everything. Harry nodded, gripping the pouch of potions tightly. Tomorrow could bring the first real chance at freedom he'd had since his parents' death, a guardian who actually wanted him, who might be able to protect him from both Dumbledore's schemes and the Dursleys' abuse. It seemed almost too much to hope for. But after weeks of revelations about the depth of betrayal he'd suffered, perhaps the universe owed him this one chance at happiness. The Great Hall was abuzz with excitement the next morning as owls swooped in with special editions of the Daily Prophet. The headline dominated the front page in bold type, Sirius Black exonerated Peter Pettigrew sentenced to life in Azkaban Ministry offers formal apology and compensation. Harry stared at the paper, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Beside the headline was a photo of a gaunt, hollow-cheeked man with long, matted black hair being escorted from Azkaban by healers in St. Mungo's robes. Despite the man's skeletal appearance, Harry could see something of himself in the set of the jaw, the shape of the eyes. His godfather. Free. They did it, Hermione whispered, reading over his shoulder. The article says the evidence was overwhelming and incontrovertible. Pettigrew confessed under Veritaserum to everything, betraying your parents, framing Sirius, living as a rat all these years. Says here Black's being taken to St. Mungo's for treatment, Ron added, scanning his own copy. 10 years with Dementors, blimey, he must be in rough shape. Harry could barely focus on the words swimming before his eyes. After a lifetime of having no family who wanted him, the possibility of a real home with someone who had loved his parents enough to be named his guardian seemed almost too fragile to believe in. Mr. Potter. Harry looked up to find Professor McGonagall standing beside him, her expression carefully neutral though her eyes held unusual warmth. The headmaster requests your presence in his office immediately, she said formally for the benefit of listening ears. Then, so quietly only Harry could hear, she added, you have received correspondence. Heart racing, Harry followed McGonagall from the great hall, aware of the curious stares following them. Once they were alone in the corridor, she spoke more freely. A letter arrived for you this morning from St. Mungo's, she explained. Given recent events, I thought it prudent to intercept it before the regular owl delivery. The headmaster does not know about it. She withdrew an envelope from her robes and handed it to Harry. The parchment was high quality, the handwriting shaky but determined. Thank you, Professor, Harry said, staring at his name written in unfamiliar script. You may read it in private before meeting with Albus, McGonagall suggested. My classroom is empty at present. Harry nodded gratefully and ducked into the Transfiguration classroom, heart pounding as he carefully opened the envelope. Dear Harry, I don't know where to begin. 10 years in Azkaban leaves a man with too much to say and too few words to say it properly. First, I am so sorry. Sorry I wasn't there for you all these years. Sorry I failed in my duty as your godfather. Sorry I went after Peter instead of staying to care for you as your parents would have wanted. The healers tell me I shouldn't write too much yet, something about emotional strain and magical instability, but I couldn't wait another day to contact you. You were the thought that kept me sane all these years, the hope that someday I might see you again, might fulfill my promise to James and Lily to look after you if anything happened to them. They tell me you're at Hogwarts now, in Gryffindor like your parents. I can't tell you how proud that makes me, how much I wish I could have been there to see you off on your first day. I don't know what you've been told about me, or if you even remember me from when you were a baby. You used to call me, Puffoo, your attempt at, Padfoot, my old nickname. Your first word was actually, up, because you wanted me to transform and give you rides on my back. I'm an animagus, you see, a big black dog. It's how I survived Azkaban with my mind relatively intact. Harry, I know this is abrupt, but I have to ask, the papers say you've been living with Lily's sister Petunia and her husband. This concerns me greatly. Your parents specifically did not want you placed with them under any circumstances. They will made this explicitly clear, naming me as primary guardian and Alice Longbottom, Neville's mother, as secondary. Once I'm released from St. Mungo's, my first priority is securing proper guardianship of you, if that's something you would want. I would understand if you need time to get to know me first. 10 years is a long time, and I'm a stranger to you now. The healers are telling me I must conclude this letter. Apparently I'm overexerting myself, their words, not mine. They say I can receive a short reply if you wish to write back. I hope to see you soon, Harry. You are so loved. Never doubt that. Your godfather, Sirius Black. Harry read the letter twice, then a third time, his vision blurring with unexpected tears. The raw emotion in Sirius's words, the confirmation that his parents had never intended him to live with the Dursleys, the offer of a home, it was overwhelming. Mr. Potter. McGonagall called softly from the doorway. Are you all right? Yes, Harry said, carefully folding the letter and tucking it into his robes. More than all right, actually. He looked up at his professor with newfound determination. My parents will specifically stated I shouldn't go to the Dursleys. Sirius says it was explicitly clear. McGonagall's expression hardened. That confirms our suspicions. Albus deliberately ignored your parents' wishes. Sirius wants me to live with him, Harry continued, unable to keep the hope from his voice. Once he's released from St. Mungo's. As is his right as your godfather, McGonagall agreed. However, you should prepare yourself for resistance from the headmaster. He will not easily relinquish the arrangements he's made for you. Because of the blood wards? Harry asked skeptically. McGonagall's lips thinned. That will be his stated reason, yes. But I suspect his reluctance has more to do with control than protection. Harry nodded grimly, pocketing Sirius's letter securely. I should go see what Dumbledore wants. Remember what we discussed about occlumency, McGonagall cautioned. Basic shields, calm emotions. Don't give him reason to suspect how much you know. I won't, Harry promised, squaring his shoulders. With each spell removed and each new revelation, he felt more equipped to face Dumbledore's manipulations. Today, bolstered by Sirius's letter, he felt stronger than ever. The walk to the headmaster's office seemed shorter than before. Harry gave the password to the gargoyle with confidence, rode the spiral staircase without trepidation. Enter, Harry, Dumbledore called at his knock. The headmaster sat behind his desk as always, but Harry immediately noticed something different in his demeanor. The customary twinkle was absent from his eyes, replaced by a grave intensity that might have intimidated Harry before. You wanted to see me, sir? Harry said, taking the offered seat. Yes, Harry. I assume you've seen this morning's news about Sirius Black. Yes, sir, Harry replied, allowing his genuine happiness to show. It's amazing news, isn't it? That he's innocent after all. Dumbledore studied him carefully. Indeed. A most unexpected development. I must confess, I find the timing curious, Pettigrew's sudden capture after a decade in hiding, coinciding with certain changes in your behavior. Harry kept his expression innocent. Sir. Tell me, Harry, Dumbledore said, leaning forward slightly, what do you know about your godfather beyond what you've read in today's paper? Harry hesitated, calculating how much to reveal. Not much, sir. I didn't even know I had a godfather until recently. No one ever mentioned him. And yet you seem quite pleased by his exoneration, Dumbledore observed. One might almost think you had a personal interest in the outcome. Wouldn't anyone be happy to learn an innocent man has been freed from prison? Harry countered. Especially someone connected to my parents? Dumbledore conceded the point with a slight nod. Of course. Forgiveness and justice are admirable qualities, Harry. He paused, adjusting his spectacles. However, I must caution you against forming too many expectations regarding Sirius. His imprisonment has taken a significant toll, both mentally and magically. The road to recovery will be long. I understand that, sir, Harry said, thinking of the shaky handwriting in Sirius's letter. Good, Dumbledore said. Then you will also understand why, despite his legal exoneration, Sirius is in no position to assume any guardianship responsibilities. For the foreseeable future, the arrangements regarding your summer residence must remain unchanged. And there it was, the expected resistance. Harry took a deep breath, reminding himself to tread carefully. With respect, sir, shouldn't that be for the Wisengamot to decide? Since it's a legal matter of guardianship. A flicker of surprise crossed Dumbledore's face at Harry's informed response. The Wisengamot concerns itself with criminal proceedings, Harry, not custodial arrangements for underage wizards. Those fall under the purview of the Department of Magical Children's Services. Then shouldn't they evaluate whether Sirius is capable of guardianship once he's recovered? Harry pressed. Instead of just assuming he can't. Dumbledore's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Harry, I fear you're not considering the complete picture. The blood protection your mother provided requires you to reside with her blood kin, your aunt. It has kept you safe from Voldemort's remaining supporters for a decade. Abandoning that protection would be profoundly unwise. But sir, Harry said, emboldened by the knowledge in Sirius's letter, what if my parents will specify other arrangements? Shouldn't their wishes count for something? Dumbledore went very still. What do you know about your parents' will, Harry? Harry realized his misstep too late. He hadn't meant to reveal knowledge of the will yet, but his eagerness had gotten the better of him. Nothing specific, sir, he backtracked hastily. Just, well, most people leave wills, don't they? Especially during a war. I assumed my parents would have made arrangements for me if anything happened to them. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment, his blue eyes seeming to pierce through Harry's hastily erected mental shields. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Your parents' will was indeed filed with the ministry. However, the magical binding became unstable after their deaths, a not uncommon occurrence when powerful magic is involved in the manner of death. The document was sealed for security reasons until you come of age. Another lie, Harry knew, but he nodded as if accepting the explanation. I understand, sir. It's just. I've never had a real family. If Sirius wanted to be my guardian once he's better. A natural desire, Dumbledore said, his grandfatherly persona reasserting itself. And I would not deny you the opportunity to know your godfather, Harry. Once he has been declared stable by the healers, supervised visits could certainly be arranged. Supervised? By whom? Harry asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. By appropriate ministry officials, of course, Dumbledore said smoothly. Or perhaps by myself, as your magical guardian during the school year. Harry bit back his frustration. Every concession Dumbledore offered came with strings attached, ways for the headmaster to maintain control and surveillance. Thank you for considering it, sir, he said, deliberately vague in his response. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss? Dumbledore seemed to debate internally for a moment before asking, have you experienced any unusual dreams lately, Harry? Particularly regarding the third-floor corridor. The abrupt change of subject caught Harry off guard. Dreams, sir? No, I don't think so. Just the usual stuff. I see. Dumbledore steepled his fingers thoughtfully. And your scar? Any pain or discomfort? No, sir, Harry said truthfully. The occasional twinges he'd felt earlier in the term had actually subsided since the spell removals began, though he didn't mention that connection. Very good, Dumbledore said, though he seemed almost disappointed. Well, I won't keep you from your classes any longer, Harry. Thank you for your time. Recognizing the dismissal, Harry rose and headed for the door, relieved to escape the tension of the conversation. Oh, and Harry? Dumbledore called just as he reached for the doorknob. Should you receive any communication from Sirius, I would appreciate being informed. In my capacity as your magical guardian, I should be aware of all correspondence you receive from adults outside the school. Harry turned, fixing his expression into one of polite agreement. Of course, Professor. If I hear from him, I'll let you know. The lie came easily, justified by the greater deception Dumbledore had practiced against him for years. As he descended the spiral staircase, Harry's mind was already racing with plans. He needed to respond to Sirius immediately, warning him about Dumbledore's resistance. And they needed to accelerate their timeline for removing the remaining spells before the headmaster could implement whatever contingency plans he was clearly formulating. The game was intensifying, the stakes rising with each move. But for the first time, Harry felt he might actually have a chance at winning his freedom. He's desperate, Hermione concluded after Harry recounted his meeting with Dumbledore. They had gathered in their secret classroom, protected by the strongest privacy charms they knew. The situation with Sirius threatens his entire plan for you. Which we still don't fully understand, Ron pointed out, pacing restlessly. I mean, yeah, there's some prophecy about Harry defeating you-know-who, but why all the manipulation? The compulsion spells, the Dursleys, hiding the will. Control, Harry said simply. Dumbledore needed me compliant, grateful, and easy to direct. Someone raised by loving guardians might be too independent, too well-adjusted to run headlong into danger just because Dumbledore hinted I should. Hermione nodded grimly. It's classic conditioning. Deprive someone of love and security, then offer approval as a reward for desired behavior. You'd be primed to do anything for his praise. That's messed up, Ron muttered, his face flushed with anger on Harry's behalf. What did you write back to Sirius? Hermione asked, changing the subject. Harry withdrew a sealed letter from his robes. Mostly just introducing myself properly, telling him I'd love to live with him once he's recovered. I warned him Dumbledore would fight it, but didn't go into detail about the spells or everything else we've discovered. That seemed too much for a first letter, especially while he's still in St. Mungo's. Smart, Hermione approved. How will you send it? Dumbledore probably has the Ollery monitored. Professor McGonagall offered to deliver it personally, Harry explained. She's visiting St. Mungo's this evening to provide a statement about Pettigrew's capture. Good, Ron said. Better than risking Hedwig getting intercepted. Their planning was interrupted by a soft knock at the door, a specific pattern they'd established for their allies. Harry checked the small enchanted parchment that showed who was outside. It's Madame Pomfrey, he said, moving to open the door. The matron entered quickly, looking more harried than usual. I can't stay long, she said without preamble. The headmaster has implemented new reporting requirements for the hospital wing. Every treatment must be logged in duplicate, with one copy sent directly to his office. He's tightening his control, Hermione observed worriedly. Indeed, Pomfrey agreed. Which makes continuing your treatment there impossible, Mr. Potter. However, I've arranged an alternative. She withdrew a small wooden box from her robes and set it on the table. Inside were several crystal vials containing a swirling silver-blue potion. This is a modified version of the spell dissolution potion used at St. Mungo's for curse victims, she explained. I've adapted it to target the specific magical signatures of the remaining spells on you, Mr. Potter. Is it safe? Hermione asked, examining the vials with academic interest. As safe as any method of removing such deeply integrated spells can be, Pomfrey said honestly. The risk is minimal compared to leaving them in place, particularly given recent developments. How does it work? Harry asked, picking up one of the vials. You take one dose daily, precisely at midnight when your magical core is at its most receptive state, Pomfrey instructed. The potion will gradually dissolve the connections between the spells and your core, allowing your magic to naturally expel the foreign influences. Will it hurt? Ron asked, eyeing the swirling liquid dubiously. There may be some discomfort, Pomfrey acknowledged. Similar to what Mr. Potter experienced during our direct removal sessions, but more diffuse. The process will also likely cause vivid dreams as suppressed memories resurface. Harry nodded, accepting the risks. How long will it take to remove all the remaining spells? Approximately 3 weeks, Pomfrey said. The potion works systematically, starting with the newest spells and progressing to the oldest. The loyalty compulsions will dissolve first, followed by the behavioral modifications, then the tracking charms. The oldest spells, those placed when you were an infant, will be the last to go. And Dumbledore won't be able to detect the removals? Hermione asked. Not immediately, Pomfrey confirmed. The potion works gradually enough that the magical disruption should appear as normal fluctuations in a growing wizard's core. By the time he might notice significant changes, the process will be nearly complete. Thank you, Harry said sincerely, carefully returning the vial to the box. For everything you've done. Pomfrey's professional demeanor softened slightly. I took an oath as a healer, Mr. Potter. First, do no harm. Allowing these unauthorized spells to remain would violate that oath. She checked her watch. I must return before my absence is noted. Remember, 1 vial at midnight, every night, until the supply is exhausted. After she departed, the three friends stared at the box of potions that represented Harry's best chance at complete freedom from Dumbledore's magical influence. 3 more weeks, Harry said, both relieved and impatient. Then all 38 spells will be gone. Just in time for Christmas break, Ron noted. Think Sirius might be recovered enough by then to at least see you? I hope so, Harry said, allowing himself to imagine a Christmas with actual family who wanted him. But even if he's not, I'm not going back to the Dursleys. Not ever again. You can come to the Burrow, Ron offered immediately. Mum would love to have you. Or my parents' house, Hermione added. They've been curious about my wizard friends. Harry felt a rush of gratitude for his friend's unwavering support. Thanks, both of you. But I think Professor McGonagall has a plan for the break. She mentioned something about secure accommodations being arranged. Speaking of plans, Hermione said, her expression turning serious, we need to consider what happens after all the spells are removed. Dumbledore will eventually realize what's happened, and he'll try to reassert control. Let him try, Ron said fiercely. We know what he's up to now. He can't manipulate Harry if we're watching for it. It's not just about manipulation anymore, Harry said quietly. Once he realizes I've broken free completely, that I know about the will, the theft, everything, he'll see me as a threat. Not just to his plans for me, but to his reputation and position. A heavy silence fell as they contemplated the implications. Albus Dumbledore wasn't just their headmaster, he was chief warlock of the Wizengamot, supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, and the most politically powerful figure in magical Britain. Opposing him openly would be dangerous indeed. Then we need leverage, Hermione said finally, her analytical mind already working through the problem. Information he doesn't want made public. Like the evidence Madame Bones collected about the spells. Ron suggested. That's part of it, Harry agreed. But we need more. Something that would make him back off completely, not just make concessions. What about whatever's hidden in the third-floor corridor? Hermione suggested. Dumbledore asked specifically if you'd been dreaming about it. It must be important to his plans. The Philosopher's Stone, Harry nodded. We know Voldemort wants it, and Dumbledore is using it as bait, with me as the trap, somehow. So if we figured out exactly what he's planning with the stone. Ron began. We'd have leverage, Hermione finished. Something concrete to threaten him with if he doesn't leave you alone. Harry considered this. The idea of actively investigating the stone went against all his instincts for self-preservation. Yet they needed to understand Dumbledore's endgame if they were to counter it effectively. All right, he decided. But we're not charging in blindly. We research first, find out everything we can about the stone, about Nicholas Flamel, about the protections likely guarding it. And only then do we consider actually going near it, Hermione agreed firmly. This isn't about playing into Dumbledore's hands, it's about understanding his strategy to defeat it. Ron nodded. Knowledge is power and all that. Sounds like something Snape would say, actually. Despite the seriousness of their situation, Harry found himself smiling. 2 months ago, he'd been stumbling through Hogwarts in a fog of artificial trust and manufactured bravery, manipulated toward a confrontation he didn't understand for purposes he couldn't fathom. Now, with his mind clearing more each day and allies gathering around him, he was finally taking control of his own destiny. The road ahead remained uncertain and dangerous, but at least now he was choosing his own path rather than following Dumbledore's breadcrumbs. That night, as the castle clock struck midnight, Harry took the first dose of Pomfrey's dissolution potion. The liquid tasted of mint and metal, just like Snape's masking potion, but with an underlying bitterness that made his eyes water. As it spread through his system, he felt an odd tingling sensation, as if parts of his magic were awakening from a long slumber. He fell asleep wondering what memories might surface as the spells dissolved, what parts of himself he might reclaim that Dumbledore had tried to suppress for all these years. Harry stands in a cottage he doesn't recognize, yet feels intimately familiar. A fire crackles in the hearth, illuminating comfortable furniture and moving photographs on the mantel. "He's getting so big, Lily," comes a voice from behind him. "Soon he'll be out flying me." Harry turns to see a tall man with unruly black hair and glasses, grinning down at a baby in a woman's arms. The woman has brilliant green eyes, his eyes, and auburn hair that catches the firelight like copper. "James, he's barely a year old," Lily laughs, bouncing the baby who must be Harry himself. "Let's wait until he can walk properly before putting him on a broom." "Too late," James says smugly. Padfoot already got him a training model for his birthday. "You should see him, zooming around the garden, knocking over the gnomes." The scene shifts, dissolving into smoke before reforming. Now they're in the same cottage, but the atmosphere is tense. James paces by the window, wand in hand. "I don't like it," he's saying. Switching to Peter feels wrong somehow. Sirius is convinced it's the right move, Lily says, though she looks uncertain. "No one would suspect Peter." "That's the point, I suppose," James sighs. "But Dumbledore's insistence on performing the Fidelius himself. I can't shake the feeling he has other motives." "You think he's still focused on that prophecy?" Lily asks, her voice dropping to a whisper as she glances toward what must be baby Harry's room. "I know he is," James says grimly. "Why else would he have us in hiding instead of fighting?" "He's setting something up, Lily. I just can't figure out what." The scene shifts again. It's night now. Lily is working at a table covered with complex rune diagrams, muttering incantations under her breath. James enters, carrying baby Harry in pajamas decorated with tiny snitches. "Is it ready?" James asks, nodding toward whatever Lily is creating. "Almost," she replies, adding one final rune to the design. "It won't stop him completely if he finds us, but it should buy us time to escape." "And if..." Her voice catches, "if the worst happens, it should protect Harry." "It won't come to that," James says with forced confidence. "The Fidelius will hold. Peter won't betray us." Lily looks up, her green eyes troubled. "And if Dumbledore is right? If Voldemort is specifically targeting Harry because of the prophecy? Then we'll face that too," James says firmly. "But I'm not raising our son to be Albus Dumbledore's weapon, prophecy or no prophecy. Harry deserves a normal life." Lily nods, rising to embrace her husband and son. "A normal life," she echoes. "That's all I want for him." The scene dissolves once more, reforming into the most terrible memory of all. Green light, a high, cold laugh, his mother screams. But this time, there's more. As Lily falls, her wand traces a final pattern, activating the runes she'd prepared. They glow with blinding intensity, forming a barrier between baby Harry and Voldemort. "What is this magic?" Voldemort hisses, momentarily taken aback. His red eyes narrow as he studies the runic shield. "Clever, Lily Potter. But not clever enough. Avada Kedavra." The green light of the killing curse strikes the runic barrier and rebounds, engulfing Voldemort in his own deadly magic. As his body disintegrates, something dark and smoky tears free from the collapsing form, hovering momentarily before fleeing through a window. In the sudden silence, baby Harry cries in his crib, a lightning-shaped cut on his forehead bleeding freely. The runic barrier flickers, then seems to sink into his very skin, disappearing from view but not from existence. Minutes pass, or perhaps hours, before a new figure appears in the nursery doorway, Albus Dumbledore, his face grave as he surveys the scene. He approaches the crib cautiously, waving his wand in complex diagnostic patterns over the crying child. "Remarkable," he murmurs, studying the results of his spells. "Lily's sacrifice created a protection I did not anticipate. And yet, yes, this could work even better than I'd planned." He reaches into the crib, lifting baby Harry with surprising gentleness. "The boy who lived," he says softly. "Yes, that will capture the public's imagination nicely." And when the time comes. He doesn't finish the thought, but his expression turns calculating as he begins casting spells, the first of the 38 that would bind Harry to his will for the next decade. Harry woke with a gasp, his scar burning as if freshly cut. The dream, no, the memory, lingered with startling clarity. His parents' faces, their voices, their determination to protect him not just from Voldemort but from Dumbledore's machinations as well. And most devastating of all, the revelation that it had been his mother's planned protection, not some mysterious power of love, that had saved him that night. Dumbledore had known, had seen the evidence of Lily's runic magic, and had chosen to craft a different narrative entirely. Why? To ensure Harry remained ignorant of his mother's brilliant magical innovation. To perpetuate the myth that Harry possessed some unique power against Voldemort. Whatever the reason, it was one more deception in a pattern that stretched back to the very night of his parents' murder. Dumbledore had begun placing controlling spells on Harry while his parents' bodies were still warm, already calculating how to use the orphan child for his greater plans. Harry reached for the glass of water beside his bed with a shaking hand, trying to process the enormity of what he'd witnessed. If the potion was already unlocking such significant memories, what else might surface in the coming weeks as more spells dissolved? More importantly, what would he do with this knowledge? The revelation about his mother's protection undermined Dumbledore's entire Blood Ward justification for placing him with the Dursleys. It wasn't Harry's connection to Aunt Petunia that protected him, it was Lily's runic magic, embedded in his very skin. Dawn was breaking outside the dormitory windows. In a few hours, he would need to face the day, attend classes, maintain the pretense that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The foundations of what Harry believed about his past, about his very survival, had been irrevocably shaken. As he lay in bed watching the sunrise, Harry made a silent promise to his parents. He would honor their wish for him to live a normal life, free from manipulation. He would uncover the full truth about their deaths and Dumbledore's subsequent actions. And most of all, he would ensure that neither their sacrifices nor their memories would be twisted to serve anyone else's agenda, not Voldemort's, and certainly not Albus Dumbledore's. Chapter 3, The Liberation. Harry taking action to remove the spells and secure his autonomy. Confrontation with Dumbledore revealing larger plans. Resolution that changes Harry's trajectory in the magical world. New protections and alliances established. Setup for Harry's changed future path. This outline provides a strong foundation for a compelling 3-chapter story that explores the concept thoroughly. I'll wait for the prompt to write Chapter 1. The Invisible Chains, Story Outline. Plot overview. After the Halloween troll incident, Madame Pomfrey performs routine healing scans on Harry Potter and makes a disturbing discovery: 38 different tracking, monitoring, and influencing spells on his person, all tracing back to Dumbledore's office. This revelation shatters Harry's newfound trust in the wizarding world and forces him to question everything about his life since arriving at Hogwarts. With the help of unlikely allies, Harry must navigate a complex web of manipulations while taking control of his own destiny for the first time. Themes: trust betrayed and rebuilt, the price of autonomy, power dynamics between children and authority figures, the morality of the greater good, found family versus institutional control, the courage to question authority. Character arcs. Harry Potter transforms from a grateful, trusting boy into a more discerning, empowered young wizard who learns to rely on his own judgment while maintaining his compassionate nature. Hermione Granger evolves from a rule-following authority respecter into a critical thinker who uses her brilliant mind to challenge unjust systems. Ron Weasley navigates the tension between family loyalty and friendship, ultimately finding his own moral compass. Professor McGonagall discovers the line between institutional loyalty and personal ethics, becoming Harry's advocate from within the system. Severus Snape confronts his own complicity in Dumbledore's schemes and his obligation to protect Lily's son. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.